It was 9-0. It was a 9-0 decision. How's he going to spin this was a 9-0 decision?
Oh, it was 9-0. Fuck. I thought he was a legal guy. I didn't know he was a fucking math major. I didn't know this guy was doing fucking linear algebra and fucking topography in the 9th grade. I didn't know this dude was a fucking Calc 3 DVQ after diapers guy. I didn't know that we were getting the mathematical and out. My bad. What a fucking moron I was. Holy shit. I thought we were getting the legal and 9-0? How could you? Why is it that the totality of circumstances language was adopted from, I believe, from Bolden and then added to the...
Who's helping you now?
What? What do you mean, who's helping out?
Is that Kafka or Pisco?
I don't even know if either one of them are awake. I read the whole decision on stream.
Okay.
I'm guessing you didn't?
Go ahead.
Hold on. Look at me right now. What are the changes that Alito suggested to the Gingles framework?
To the Gingles framework? I have not memorized them. I'm happy to
then how are you even answering the question of whether or not a Section 2 case could be brought before the court if you don't even know the change?
For looking off screen and getting it from your chat. I'm making a joke, Destiny.
This was one of the most cited cases in the decision. You have no idea because you haven't even read it. You don't even know. I don't even know how you were answering my earlier questions if you didn't even know what any of this even was. How are you answering whether or not a Section 2 case could even be brought before if the whole point of Section 2 cases was they relied on the Gingles framework, and now that framework has been completely destroyed? Kagan says we should call it the Calais upturning or whatever instead of the new Gingles framework. You can't explain it. Why are you explaining this to me now when you just said you don't even know what the new framework is? Average debate enjoyer was right about everything. Soon as my platform starts taking off, The Pondering and Wick TV no longer are willing to risk me blowing the left out in debates. Cowards. How can you have a debate on court packing with 4 lefties? By the way, at Pisco Liddy, excluding you from the above, we disagree on many things, but you are not a coward. Josiah quote tweeted, holy shit, where to begin? 1, the host picks the guests. 2, I'm not the host, I'm a guest who's publicly sparred with you multiple times. 3, the host, Wick, has invited you to panels before. 4, at no point did Wick and I discuss or even mention you to each other. 5, you could have just DM'd me on Twitter or Discord if you had any questions or suspicions. 6, your reaction was genuinely shockingly psychotic, especially your 15-minute livestream rant that was sent to me. Wait, is there a link to that? Proving your transformation into outright MAGA hack is nearly complete. Bad faith, conspiratorial, deranged, dishonest, and completely fucking wrong, LeMayo. 7, I was just going to leave this on read, but I just realized you'll try to talk to me if Wick opens up the panel on Tuesday. So to clarify, this post is the last time I'll directly engage with you. Your meltdown was much too bad faith and creepy for what little respect I had left for you. Yikes emoji. Yikes face emoji. Uh-oh. Ryan is incredibly good faith and level-headed. I've known him for a long time. Furthermore, as a lawyer, he knows that coming off as crazy or unhinged is totally damaging to his persuasive ability. So he'd go out of his way to avoid this. He's trained to be professional in debate. Wait. Dude, I'm so schizo. Is this not like Taylor Lorenz? You're accusing me of doing things that I wouldn't even be able to do because I'm a journalist and we have an ethics board somewhere or something that makes it so we can't even act unethically. It's not possible. He's trained to be professional in debate. Your tactics of smearing him so you can avoid him fool absolutely no one. He'd demolish you. You know it. I know it. Ryan knows it. Holy shit. Darwin to Jesus, lifelong atheist who found Jesus Christ, husband and father, exposing the lies and fallacies of atheism, proclaiming the truth of Christianity. Jesus Christ. Who the fuck are these people? Counterpoint. What is he mad about for this?
And we're going to be taking a look at a friend of the stream, Destiny. Destiny's my buddy. He and I always chatting. Have a great cordial relationship, me and him. And we'll see whether or not Destiny's legal takes make any sense. So let's, with that, take it away, Destiny. Show us what you got.
I don't know, would these be considered interlocutory appeals? Basically, they can enjoin or they can stay or they can make these preliminary rulings on these lower cases before the case.
I can't do Destiny at 1.25. I just can't. Like, if he talks too fast. It's going to have to be 1. I can't do 1.25. I can't understand a fucking word he's saying.
Cases of even the court trying to join somebody of these stays is considered an interlocutory appeal. These are all words that you should know. I think I'm listening to you at 1.5 and I heard myself at what? Okay, sorry. Oh boy. All right. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Made their way up properly to the Supreme Court. And I think there's a world where somebody in chat said, Destiny, the shadow docket is a completely normal procedure that lives our brain broken about. I literally voted for common law, but the hysteria around that is unfounded.
His chatter is completely correct. The shadow docket is a very normal procedure. Let's see what Destiny says about the shadow docket.
I think that there's a world where maybe shadow docket stuff is okay, but the problem is that it seems like what it's become is an incredibly partisan tool for justices to make rulings, really early rulings, about cases that haven't even really gotten up to them yet, that they probably shouldn't have a say over, in cases that like clearly aren't an emergency, is the issue.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the reason why the shadow docket, quote unquote shadow docket, is just a branding issue. It's not actually a serious problem. Regular cases go up to the Supreme Court like this. You go to case, the judge makes a ruling. That's at the district court level. You appeal it to the circuit court level. They make a ruling. You appeal that to the Supreme Court level, they decide. That's a regular case. But sorry, whenever I do the hand gestures, the fucking camera gets blurred. But in some cases, there's a temporary relief given, like an injunction. There's something that happens before the case is decided. There's early relief. When a case goes up to the Supreme Court on a early relief, on an injunction that comes early in the case, you can still, in some cases, appeal it. But it's not an on-the-merits decision. And when that reaches the Supreme Court, they sometimes decide it without giving a full opinion, which they have always done and typically do. The fascination with this, you can still, in some cases, appeal it, but it's not.
If a temporary restraining order request, preliminary temporary restraining order request got up to the Supreme Court via the shadow docket and they approved it, how would you be able to shadow docket appeal a shadow docket? Maybe you could. I don't know. It'd be interesting if you cited an example of this. I have a feeling you won't, but whatever.
An on-the-merits decision. And when that reaches the Supreme Court, they sometimes decide it without giving a full opinion, which they have always done and typically do. In the case, you can still, in some cases, appeal it, but it's not an on-the-merits decision. And when that reaches the Supreme Court, they sometimes decide it without giving a full opinion, which they have always done and typically do.
This was the weirdest phrasing, on the merits decision. I mean, like, I guess I kind of understand. Like, preliminary stuff is going to be less focused on the merits because it hasn't been debated as much, because it hasn't made its way up through the lower courts. I don't even know. I don't even know what he just said here. I don't know what he just said meaningfully here. I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe I was a retard, I guess. I'm not actually, but whatever.
The fascination with this as a partisan tool is an invention of modern media. This is a very standard practice. The Supreme Court's been doing it forever. This is not a weird thing. It's just a thing that people are currently branding as a problem.
So like the shadow docket stuff that was leaked on the New York Times basically had, it basically had to do with an EPA rule that was going through, okay? So in our body of things, okay, remember, all right, I repeat this stuff for you guys just as much as for yourself, okay? You have the Constitution, okay? And that makes for Congress, okay? And then Congress can pass laws, all right? Laws or statutes, if you wish, if you will, okay? Okay, and then from there, we have the president / the executive who executes the laws. And one of the ways that they execute the laws is through rules, okay? So if you see something say this is a federal rule, a rule.
That's for an executive agency. What he's describing is that Congress creates an agency through laws. The laws are then articulated by the agency. And in this example, the agency is an executive agency, which is why the executive branch is articulating the rules. There's other agencies that are not inherently executive, but he's describing the executive agency.
Okay, that's not a law. That's the executive carrying out the law, okay? So the Constitution, okay, gives the power to Congress to create statutes or laws that the executive will interpret how it will, and it'll create rules from those laws, okay? So there was a new EPA rule that was going into effect, and some people...
You guys know this shit, right? Like...
Then skip it.
Like, no, be honest right now. Like, is this new information for anybody? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, do I need to be, like, really explaining some very basic stuff? Because I would not have thought that chat needed this explanation. But if this explanation is helpful, I can do this shit.
Okay. Well, we're suing the executive. They were suing the United States saying, we don't believe that the reading of this rule is fair. You're forcing us to change something in a way that we don't think is okay. And what happened is while that case was going on, I don't even know if there was an appeal or not, but Roberts basically decided that this case that's happening right now, I think that these guys are making a good point. I think that there's a risk of irreparable harm if this rule goes through too fast. We're going to go ahead and we're going to issue, I think it would be an injunction, right? It wouldn't be a stay on government. I think they enjoined the government from carrying out that rule. The rationale was, the bad part was the rationale was crazy. Oh, fuck, you have to dive into so many different topics. The rationale that Roberts used here was dog shit. How do you pronounce the guy's name? Is it Bayer or Breyer? Stephen Breyer wrote a response and he was like, Roberts, I think that you're kind of fucking retarded here, bro. Maybe we should just do this. Wouldn't this make way more sense? I think most of the other people agreed. I think Alito or somebody came out and slurped up some shit, and then there was one other justice whose name I don't remember who slurped up some shit. And then the Supreme Court shut down this federal rule out of nowhere, and then it basically remained shut down for like 3 or 4 years. And then I think by the time it even got to the Supreme Court, eventually when they go to rule on like this new case in front of the Supreme Court, they go to rule on the prior rule that they'd already enjoined the government again. And then it was just bullshit. All of this procedurally is just fucking is whack. Oh, is it?
So Destiny, as you can tell, doesn't know very much about the case he's talking about and doesn't have any of the specifics. He's just telling you this is bullshit, which I'm sure his audience eats up. But
so we read all of the emails, literally on stream. I'm sure Ryan is going to dive into the details of the case. I hope to see him. Maybe I was incorrect on something. We'll see if he gets into it. But okay, I didn't want to re-go through like every single part of the underlying thing here was not relevant to the example that we were bringing up here. But okay, go ahead. Let's hear. Maybe I was wrong on something. Tell me.
But if you don't know why the rationale is bullshit and you can't explain it, nobody should take you seriously because you're just giving an unsupported opinion.
I'm not justifying every single thing I'm saying right now. Do I have to go back and talk about every single part of the thing? The reason why, in my opinion, the rationale was bullshit was because Roberts thought that this was appropriate to enjoin the government for doing this action because he was saying that there would be the threat of irreparable harm, which is generally a burden that you need to meet for preliminary things like temporary restraining orders or a preliminary injunction. You have to meet this threshold, this burden showing that there will be irreparable harm, meaning the damage will be so great to you that you will not be able to be made whole again, even if you win your court case. So you've destroyed the whole purpose of the court, right? And the Roberts agreed there's going to be irreparable harm if this rule is allowed to go through. But everybody else in these emails was pointing out, well, hold on. One, irreparable harm, they're dollar damages. By definition, we can award dollar rewards. How are we saying there's irreparable harm? Number one. Number two, the federal government literally created like this multi-year carve-out for these corporations to go through where they could, I believe it was the state could petition the federal government for 2 years of time, or the, I think that was one way through it. They also had these court cases that were going through. And this is what, is it Bayer? Fuck, I should know the name of the judge, was pointing out to Roberts, who's like, well, it seems like there's already remedies for these people in place. Keep in mind, preliminary orders from courts are extraordinary things. A temporary restraining order, a preliminary injunction, these are extraordinary things. And this is skipping the ordinary line of command. It's shadow docketing its way from the lower district court all the way up to the Supreme Court, which is also an extraordinary thing. So there's an extraordinary thing of an extraordinary thing. For why? To prevent the irreparable harm of some monetary damages? That's not definitionally, ordinarily considered irreparable ever. And the other justices in emails, by the way, brought these points up. I know that because I read them. So, I can explain it if you want, but I mean, I wasn't explaining every single part of this. Well, I was just trying to like catch up people on why I had an issue related to the whatever the shocker docket thing or whatever it was. But my bad, I guess. Okay, it's Breyer. My bad.
So there's that. Like, I do urge you, if somebody's criticizing a legal ruling, if they can't give you an explanation, ignore them. Right? Like they have to provide an argument. If they don't have an argument, it's just opinion. What Stephen is describing somewhat ineptly is that in a case where an agency is doing something that someone thinks is illegal, they would go to a district court and say, district court, we want an injunction to prevent the agency from doing this illegal thing. In this case, in the case of the this EPA rule, his description was pretty muddled, so I'm not exactly positive what he's talking about. But I think he's talking about the 2016 case, West Virginia v. EPA, because he's talking about the EPA, and this is the case that people talk about as like the birth of the modern shadow docket.
Is he not even aware of the leaked emails? Was he criticizing me for I didn't read this underlying case. To be fair, I didn't. But like, I think I quoted the leaked emails. This is what everybody was all up in arms about. And I thought it was kind of disgusting. Is he not aware of that New York Times story? I thought that story was a pretty big deal. It would be kind of crazy for him to blast me on not reading the case when he's not aware of the pretty big media reporting on this, especially because it's considered, my understanding is it's considered exceptionally rare to ever get internal writings from Supreme Court justices. My understanding is that is an exceptionally rare thing, such that when that kind of stuff is leaked, I think people start looking at actual Supreme Court justices themselves as having been the ones that leaked it. Like it's considered that exceptional of a thing. So it's a little surprising that he didn't hear about any of that reporting. Then again, I think it kind of cut against conservatives. So maybe his funnel, maybe he just didn't get any of that in his social media feed. Who the fuck knows?
So what happened there was that at the district court level, there's a suit for an injunction. They're claiming that the EPA's rule is unconstitutional or otherwise problematic. Keep in mind that the Biden administration was using the EPA to essentially shut down the entire coal industry in the country. That's what the Biden administration was doing.
As per your opinion, that wasn't the opinion of the Biden admin. And the opinion of the Biden admin was that they were enacting a rule that they had constitutional authority to do so based on a statute passed by Congress. That's what the court case was about. I see that you've already prejudged it, though. Good for you.
They were passing a rule that would shut down the entire coal industry, and this was obviously litigated. Now, it gets appealed.
Good faith, by the way, good faith summary of that case, by the way. Good faith summary of that. Would have shut down the entire coal industry. Good job. Good faith.
And it's going up to the circuit court because they're appealing to say to the circuit court, hey, circuit court, we think that if the district court didn't give us an injunction, circuit court, if you don't give us an injunction, the coal industry is going to suffer irreparable harm because we're going to get shut down and then we're going to be in litigation for like 2 or 3 years. By the time this gets decided, the industry's already cooked. So please do something to help us now. The Supreme Court reaches down and takes the appeal and says, yes, coal industry, you're likely to win. What the Biden administration is doing is a violation of major questions doctrine, but they weren't deciding the merits. So they didn't actually decide the entire case. They just said the injunction is a good idea and then they sent it back down. So It's a purely procedural issue. There was an injunction that was pending. It was going to be litigated for a long time. There's going to be irreparable harm to the coal industry. So the Supreme Court stepped in and solved with finality that the injunction can be granted. That way, the coal industry wouldn't get neutered while litigation proceeded. This is all that Destiny's talking about.
You have to show the likelihood of irreparable harm, and you have to show a likelihood to succeed on the merits for a preliminary injunction to be granted. I always forget one of them, but there are 4 things that you need to show for a preliminary injunction. You need to show a likelihood of success on the merits, that the whoever is applying for the movement or whatever is likely to succeed on the merits. You have to show that there's a risk of irreparable harm, if not for the granting of the injunction. You have to show that there is there's like a public balance of equities, and I think you have to show that you're not disproportionately harming the other side. I always mix up these last 2. I don't remember them. But the irreparable harm one is the big standard that I don't think was adequately met here at all. And I think that Breyer said as much in his reply to Roberts, and I don't feel like Roberts ever really gave a response to that. Because, I don't know.
Makes it sound very colorful, but it's not exactly this nefarious scheme in the way he's describing. Blasterbot with the 5 natural law memberships. Look at that. Blasterbot, always a G, always a dinosaur lover. Blasterbot, appreciate you stopping by. Thank you, my friend. And thank you to those dinosaur enthusiasts blessed with Blasterbot's generosity. Anyway, let's see where Destiny's going with this.
Oh, wait, it's Michael Breyer's, not Stephen Breyer's. What Supreme Court was Stephen something? Who am I thinking of? Or is it Stephen Bayer?
I don't fuck their names.
Or was that Mike from PA's name and you're just wasting my time by tagging me with some retarded fucking
Good one!
I should be you're lucky with a flare.
Okay, he's getting one guy.
It was just crazy. Can another justice overrule or revoke?
It was just crazy. This is what I mean. Like a lot of the legal analysis that you get on, like when you go on X and you hear people saying retarded things and you're like, where the fuck are they getting this opinion from? It's because they're getting legal analysis that comes with this quality, right? He doesn't know the case. He doesn't know the...
We read all I'm not re-going over all of the emails that we read. Like the only reason I'm kind of skimming over this is because we already read through, we already read all of these. I'm not going to bring up blah, 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 blah. I'll read Breyer's response. Fuck, this isn't the one. There's a link to the actual emails themselves. I didn't even read the fucking New York Times summary because I didn't want the summary. I just wanted the emails themselves. It's not even that long of a read. I think it was like less than 20 minutes. I'm not a robot. I can't believe I'm getting one guide by a guy who didn't even read the emails, accusing me of not reading the emails. I'm getting one guide right now, but he's one-guying me. Fuck. I thought this reply was short and sweet. I feel like it was a good reply. I don't think there was ever really a response to it because Roberts just does what Roberts does. I would issue an order in these applications along the following lines. Stephen Breyer, this was his response. Applications for stays having been submitted to the Chief Justice and by him referred to the court denies the applications with the following qualifications. Any state that, after submitting a request for an extension consistent with that described on page 59 of the Solicitor General's memorandum, does not receive such an extension may renew its application for a stay with this court. So the federal government had already built in a place where they could say, listen, if you need an extension on this, you need to wait to maybe for this to go through the courts, or you need more time to comply or whatever, then you can have a process. There was a multi-year delay on this that was built in, and I'm assuming that the Solicitor General brought this up when they were arguing this case. It was on page 59 of his thing. If you don't receive that extension, then fine. Come back to the Supreme Court and we'll issue you a stay. That seems reasonable, right? Any party may renew its application for a stay after the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit has issued its decision, which is how the ordinary chain is supposed to go. District Court, Circuit Court, Supreme Court. Stephen Breyer, Justice Breyer says, I prefer this temporizing order to a grant of these stays for several reasons. First, it is unusual for this court to issue a stay of an agency's order during the time that the Court of Appeals is considering its lawfulness. The Court of Appeals hadn't made their decision yet. So why does the Supreme Court need to jump in here? Second, issuance of the order may now prematurely suggest a view on the merits of questions that now seem difficult. We do not yet have the Court of Appeals' view of the matter. Remember, the Supreme Court is not supposed to take a first pass at things. It's supposed to let these lower courts decide first. Once those judges have made their rulings, have looked into things, analyzed all the facts, given their legal review, and then issued a ruling, then the Supreme Court can consider all of the underlying stuff and then take their pass at it based on what the lower courts have ruled. When you're issuing, this is why I didn't like him. I'm sorry. This is earlier why I didn't like him saying they didn't take a merits-based approach. When you're issuing preliminary orders, you are considering the merits of the case. Even for a stay, definitely for a preliminary injunction, a likelihood of success on the merits is necessary to issue that preliminary injunction. And for the Supreme Court to come in and issue that before the lower court has even made a decision on that, it kind of
wink, wink, nudge, nudge, pokes the lower court for them to have a certain decision that's not appropriate for the Supreme Court to be signaling on yet. The Supreme Court hasn't taken a full view of this case like the lower courts have. It would be inappropriate. In my opinion, Breyer is correct here. We do not yet have the Court of Appeals view of the matter. Third, it is difficult at this point to say that the absence of a stay will cause irreparable harm. One of the 4 elements, you have to show this for preliminary injunctions. With respect to the private applicants, the order does not require any company to take action for 6 years. If they lose in the Court of Appeals, they may ask us for a stay then. While I concede that advanced planning may be necessary, I do not see how a few extra months will make a significant difference. With respect to the states, the Solicitor General points out that to receive from the EPA a 2-year extension of the current September 2016 deadline until September 2018, a state need only identify the approaches, if any, under consideration, describe opportunities, if any, for public input, and explain why the state requires additional time. Allowing the EPA to entertain such requests in the first instance has the virtue of allowing the agency to proceed with those aspects of the rule that are not challenged here, as well as giving the EPA the opportunity to respond to requests for an extended deadline in the first instance. Remember, you don't want to issue these preliminary things from courts. These are exceptional matters. If there are already processes and procedures that are built into the executive rule and stuff below, let that play out first. Let it play out first. You don't need to come in and do something exceptional. If the EPA grants the requests, we'll have more than enough time to hear and decide the matter. If the EPA denies the applicants' requests, then they can quickly return to us. Moreover, all of the applicants remain free to renew their applications for a stay when the D.C. Circuit issues its decision, which it has agreed to do on an expedited basis. I thought this was extremely reasonable. Nobody down here really, in my opinion, responds substantively to it. But it's a little annoying that his summary of this whole injunction was like, the EPA was trying to destroy all coal in the United States, so the Supreme Court stopped them. Like, okay, my dude, whatever, okay.
Like when you go on X and you hear people saying retarded things and you're like, where the fuck are they getting this opinion from? It's because they're getting legal analysis that comes with this quality, right? He doesn't know the case. He doesn't know the names of anybody involved. He doesn't know what happened or why it happened, but he knows it was very bad.
Oh, hold on. You're saying it would be really bad for me to have commentary on a thing where I don't really know the details of what's going on and I don't really know what's happening? You know, that would be really bad. Imagine now if you had a fucking Supreme Court issuing preliminary rulings on cases without having any of the facts in front of them. Imagine how fucked that would be. How crazy would that be that they haven't even had the consideration of the lower courts? Wouldn't that be like monumentally worse than a retard on YouTube making opinions about it rather than the Supreme Court issuing rulings on it? Maybe.
He knows it was very bad and you should all be alarmed.
True.
Now, look, do I think that you could have an interesting debate about the shadow docket? Yeah. I think me and Pisco could have a great debate about the shadow docket because Pisco knows what he's talking about with the law. He's wrong. Pisco's wrong a lot, but he's a lawyer and he's competent to have the conversation. There's a difference between that and this. Is my point.
Okay.
Like I disagree with Pisco, but we both can at least approach the topic with some amount of rigor and give the viewers some information, have them learn something. Here, he's just saying random shit. But it's bad. He knows it's bad.
The shadow docket ruling of another. So I believe that the way that it works is that one justice is allowed to issue a preliminary ruling based on a shadow docket thing. If the justice wants, though, they can submit it to the rest of the court, I think, for a ruling on it, I believe. This professor wrote the paper arguing the Trump was also in the 14th Amendment. He just wrote a short explanation of the shadow docket. What a bunch of what a waste of time reading anything from this guy. Bod? This guy, number one fucking loser. Actual fucking clown.
Uh-oh.
I wasted my fucking
He's about to get triggered right now.
time reading. Him and another law professor, Paulson, wrote this like 120-page paper on why Trump should be banned based on the 14th Amendment. But they didn't spend any time in their paper considering how inconvenient it would be, which was what the Supreme Court decision boiled down to. It would be really inconvenient. So the Supreme Court wiped away Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Oh, he's about to get mega triggered on that
Fuck
one.
this, actually. It would be really inconvenient to do this.
So now
Uh-oh.
Stephen is complaining about a different topic. He's complaining that this law professor at the University of Chicago, who wrote a paper saying that it would be possible, as I recall, his paper was arguing that you could get Trump off the ballot because, that he was an insurrectionist. This is what Colorado tried to do. They tried to get Trump off the ballot. And now Stephen's complaining that the Supreme Court ruled, and one of their basis for ruling was that they said, it turns out that it is a very, very bad idea to let states unilaterally decide who's on the presidential ballot. It's a very bad idea to have states just say, you know what, fuck it. We get to decide who gets to run for president, because then you might have, Texas taking Biden off the ballot, Colorado taking Trump off the ballot. Seems like a bad idea. And he's saying it's just inconvenient. He's downplaying it. Here's what Stephen's not talking about.
That's what they said. It's inconvenient. You just agreed it might be mighty inconvenient, but that's all it would be. It would be inconvenient. That's it.
It was a 9-0 decision. It was a 9-0 decision. The liberal justices and the conservative justices agreed on this point. So what is Stephen, in his infinite wisdom, saying here? Stephen's saying that he knows better.
Holy appeal to authority, Batman. Like, sure, it was a 9-0 decision. I think it was going to be 6-3 initially. This is the one where they released the PDF, and there was like metadata that showed that it looked like there were going to be 3. It was either concurring in parts or something where people were going to write more, and then they decided not to. I think it was still going to be a 9-0, but it was going to be like with 3 concurrents written to jerk us all off or something. But Why not address the substance of what I've said? I'm sorry. Are we saying that if it's a mighty inconvenient part of the Constitution that we just don't enforce it?
What is Stephen, in his infinite wisdom, saying here? Stephen's saying that he knows better what the law requires than a unanimous Supreme Court, the thing that the liberals and the conservatives agree upon. Not a partisan issue, unanimous Supreme Court. The 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court are 100%.
By the way, listen, I love you, but the 3 libs joined this because they were scared of some fucking insurrection shit. 1,000,000,000,000%. This might have even been the case. I think this was the one where Amy Coney Barrett wrote her concurrence, and didn't she say things like, we believe that the extra writings of the court should seek to turn down the temperature of the country, not turn up the temperature of the country. I'm pretty sure that the judges were worried about a fucking insurrection, an actual hardcore insurrection going on, like at the state level in multiple places, if they like allowed people to keep Trump off the ballot, and then it would be fucking over. So like, okay, okay. Let's just go. It's like when you have that brother who's complaining about like, I landed on free parking, I should get $20,000. Like, well, that's not actually the rules of monopoly, but your brother is also like weighs 250 pounds and he's autistic and low functioning. So you kind of like, okay, big brother, he gets the free parking money because I don't want to die, right? I'm pretty sure that was what that ruling was, but he could respond with substance to the point that I bring up, or maybe he just doesn't care to. Who knows? Who cares?
Consent on agreement. I don't exactly see what Stephen's point is here. Right?
My point is that I just don't think saying something would be mighty inconvenient. That just doesn't feel like a very good faith. I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know the fuck. I keep mixing it up. It's when the text is clear and unambiguous, and then you read the is it the history, the legislative history or whatever when it was passed, and then you do tradition. Maybe like mighty inconvenient is one of those things that's stuck somewhere. Maybe that's after 2. When the text is clear and unambiguous, if it's not, then you go on to the mighty inconvenient test. And if it's mighty inconvenient, then you throw it out, I guess. Is that
right? Like if Stephen's going to argue that he's right and the unanimous Supreme Court is wrong.
Also, by the way, it would be crazy if states decided themselves, how to add people or not add people to the ballot. That's already how it goes. How do you think we determine? Do you think the federal government issues an age proclamation when somebody's 35? No, it's up to the states to determine that. They determine what counts as a valid birth certificate. They determine what counts as a valid age. They determine what counts as whatever on these things. It's their documentation that they accept. I've never heard of any federal rules issued that give guidelines to the states for how they're supposed to ascertain qualifications to be on the fucking ballot. Well, I don't know. Maybe the justices and me, we all missed that one too. Who knows?
Shouldn't he have to give you an argument for that? We'll see.
Didn't I say it? Or I'm going to, at least.
That's one.
I think I already said it, though, that it would be mighty inconvenient. That was a big part of their argument.
I wasn't super comfortable with that discussion. After all, isn't the election left to the authority of the states? Not really. It's part in part. But
states' rights, when we need some things, federalism, when we want other things. And by other things and some things, I mean whatever it's politically partisanly convenient for us.
Federal government has a lot of control over federal elections, and there are parts of the 14th Amendment that talk about who can run and who cannot run for federal offices.
I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. That was their chief rationale.
Let's speed this up because he's just spinning his wheels here.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Because I'm reading stuff? How fast do you want me to go? Jesus Christ.
I don't want to read that. I don't care. This
My bad. I'm sorry. I'll go faster for you. Quick!
Ooh, do I sense a crash out coming? He seems getting a little angsty.
What am I angsty for? What am I crashing out on?
Speeding up. Come on, get to the point, Destiny.
You see some of my work comparing current situations, 1930s Germany. Is that comment out of line for SCOTUS justice? No, because, someday we'll go back to the Nazi shit. Although maybe we won't have to. We'll just relive it. Germany was fractured, and Hitler had to do a lot of work to bring together like different parties and to gain power in parliament, to subvert like the majority. They do all this wacky, weird shit. The Supreme Court is doing wacky and weird shit, but they're doing it with a majority elected president. That's the big difference. Donald Trump won the election as much as you can win it fair and square. So like it's the amount of hoops that he has to jump through are so much less. That's why I don't like to compare. It's so much worse than the Nazi shit because he has so much popular authority. Granted, I'm sorry, not the parliament.
Reichstag.
Okay. I'm not sure if you guys were tracking that particular argument.
Uh-oh.
But here's Destiny's current argument.
Destiny is pretty sure I've said this exact same line for like a year or whatever, but okay.
Now saying that, no, this is not like Nazi Germany because here, Trump won an overwhelming victory in 2024 and was elected and won majorities in both the House and the Senate. And because Trump is using power that was given to him in a democratic election, Destiny concludes that is, in fact, worse.
The funny thing is Ryan is just so fucking horny to disagree with me. Ryan would actually agree with me if he turned his brain on for a second. Like, let's assume there was like some authoritarian dictator that was trying to do something that you thought was really bad, like affirmative action. Because he said that, by the way, I'm not making this up, Ryan said that affirmative action was the single motivating thing for him to vote for a Republican over a Democrat, I think in the last election, okay? Let's say that a Democratic politician was trying to do affirmative action. Wouldn't it be like so much worse if they were doing that with like a Democratic majority at their back, that like so much the country seemed to be supporting this like horrendous thing in your eyes, versus like an authoritarian having to finagle leadership and finagle their way through a thing to pass it with like 20% approval, right? Like if over half the country was supporting this affirmative action thing, whoo, that's a much scarier concept. That's a much scarier thing to deal with than just like an authoritarian being a little tricky wicky trying to do some things that are kind of sneaky. Right? Like he wouldn't even like disagree with this, but he has to disagree with every single fucking thing I say here. Okay.
It is worse when the other side wins power through elections. Interesting take.
Reichstag.
Yeah, that's true. I hate it when the other side wins elections. You got me, buddy.
Reichstag. So you're saying Supreme Court decisions were basically vibes? Yes, it was. It is. They are. They're all vibes. This is why I completely and utterly reject.
True. They are.
Don't trigger me. Originalism, textualism, whatever. Okay, I'm sorry. Hold on. So Smashster in Kick Chat says, it's not that they wiped away Section 3. It's that Congress could make the law to call those.
Hold on.
Also, am I missing anything? He's called me out for my lack of legal analysis and everything so far. I feel like I've explained more legal stuff on this stream so far, more than he has. Has he explained anything? Did I miss it? Am I being... I guess he kind of explained some Shadow Dog stuff. I feel like I'd already explained it. I feel like you well-acted it a little bit. What am I watching this guy for? Okay, whatever. He just said you're wrong.
I don't know if you guys caught that, but he's getting a little bit one-guide. But...
What does he think one guide means? That every time you respond to chat, it's your one guide? Why does he keep saying... This is the second time he said this.
He just said... Law is vibes. Law is vibes. And because law is vibes, he rejects originalism and textualism.
True.
Now, let's carry that thought to its logical conclusion.
Okay.
If law is vibes, then what's the problem with packing the Supreme Court? It's just vibes.
Yeah, or like not allowing the president to put up his Supreme Court nominee for nomination, or to nominate one and then have that be voted on by the Senate, like what McConnell did, like with the Supreme Court when they operated with 8 members for over a year, right? That's kind of like vibing it out, right?
If law is vibes, then what's the problem with violating the Constitution? It's just vibes.
Isn't that what Trump has done over and over and over again? Violated the Constitution, and then the Supreme Court kind of sort of smacks his hand, but Trump has already gotten to reap all the rewards of violating the Constitution, like he's done with rejecting the War Powers Act, like he's done with abusing the Alien Enemies Act in order to ship Venezuelans off to fucking CCOT, like he's done with tariffing the entire fucking planet and then collecting over, what was it, $250 billion of tax receipts from the American public that we still have no way if we're ever even going to get that back. Isn't that kind of what he's doing? Isn't that like exactly what's happening? Like, isn't that literally exactly what's happening, kind of, maybe?
If law is vibes, then what's the problem with taking away the people's rights? It's just vibes, man.
Like when Donald Trump has been issuing bullshit indictments to political people that he doesn't agree with, and he's using the Department of Justice to attack people, like when he started naming out specific law firms, basically shutting these places down or forcing them to play ball with the government, or like when he's trying to dictate curriculum to Columbia or Harvard, or how he's pressuring other states into actually bending to his political whim by cutting off emergency funding to these states, like how Colorado's Governor Polis just pardoned or granted clemency to Tina Peters, which was a state prosecution for a state-related issue that Donald Trump should have absolutely no say in whatsoever. I mean, like we could play this game all day. We could do this on and on and on and on and on.
Vibes. If law is vibes, then what's the problem with taking away the people's rights? It's just vibes, man. It's just vibes. Law's just vibes. Like he says this in kind of like a ironic streamer way, but he's giving the game away. This is like a very serious thing to say. And if you tell people that law is vibes, then of course they're going to think packing the court's fine. If of course they're going to think the court's just like any other political body. Let's treat them like a political body. It is not a good thing that he's doing. This is a crazy fucking thing to say. And I don't
even crazier when your Supreme Court justices are ruling that way, huh?
think his audience understands how much he's poisoning them against the idea of rule of law and democracy. If law is just vibes, then what's the point of having rule of law? The rule of vibes, right? Like it's actually a very dangerous point that he's making and one that ought to be rejected. Corbyn.
If he wants to debate on, I don't even remember what we were, I don't think I have him blacklisted, right? He says, I think I blocked him on Twitter because he's just too much. He reply guys so hardcore and it's like the most bad faith retarded shit. If he wants to debate on that, on the last ruling related to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act for Alito, I mean, I'll have that conversation. I probably have to have two, just because people like him tend to cite other cases incorrectly and haven't read all the underlying cases. But if he wants to have one debate and then he can cite his bullshit, and if I can't counter it at the moment and I need to read the case, then we'll come back and have a second debate. I'll gladly do it if he wants to.
Holy shit, man. Long time. Thanks for the two. Glad that you're making it, big buddy. Hey, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, the channel slowly but surely, we chug along and grow. Are you back? I know you got kind of banned for a little bit, or you got your channel removed. Hopefully you got that fixed. I haven't seen you around in a bit. Anyway, let's see where Destiny's going.
That would try to deny the election results and lead a violent mob would be considered as insurrectionists. But I can understand your point that Congress is too weak to push said law and pass it. Okay. So remember the little thing that I drew earlier, okay? The Constitution or whatever comes first, all right? The Constitution is the document that grants power to the government.
Why is he watching me explain like basic structure of government? Why?
And foundationally serves as like the bedrock of everything that exists as part of our government. You do not need to write laws to say that what is in the Constitution is in the Constitution, okay? The term you would look for would be self-executing. If it's in the Constitution, that's it. It's law. Now,
it's funny. I think he just noticed it because he said now, right? It's in there. It's self-executing, except Section 5 says Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article, meaning that, at least to a certain extent, the provisions of this article are not self-executing.
absolutely not, and you've never in your entire life given a single example of that. We can find identical language in the Constitution that you would never, ever, 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 ever make this. You would never make this excuse for just because something says shall. The only thing that Section 5 means here is that if Congress deems it necessary to do so, they can write additional legislation as per what exists up here in the amendment. It doesn't mean that nothing here counts until it doesn't say until the Congress has written legislation, until the Congress has done any of this. None of this is in effect. What a ridiculously stupid way to read any part of the Constitution. How stupid. When the text is clear and unambiguous, you go with the text. What do you mean? Fuck me. I'm getting one guide really hard.
Because Congress...
Why am I even... I'm listening. The only reason... Also, he knows this is stupid. The only reason he's giving this argument right now is because he wants to... simp for this particular fucking ruling. The scary thing is that, like... I don't know if this will ever happen. It won't because Trump is too old. But, like, you could argue that, like, we have shalls in other parts of the Constitution, right? Well, the 22nd Amendment. No person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for more than 2 years, blah, 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 blah. Like, are we saying that this is not a part of the Constitution? Or are we saying that if there was a Section 3 of the 22nd Amendment that said the Congress shall be able to pass legislation, blah, 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 that Section 1 wouldn't apply unless Congress wrote more legislation afterwards? Like, it's just such a on its face stupid fucking argument. Fuck! I hate this argument. It's so bad and it's so stupid.
This article, meaning that, at least to a certain extent, the provisions of this article are not self-executing because Congress has the ability to pass a law in order to execute them, right?
To further clarify or to further build upon, like the Voting Rights Act, by the way. And guess what happened to the Voting Rights Act? Alito said, we don't like the additional legislation that you've written here. We're actually going to axe that. So when additional legislation is written that they don't like, they get rid of it. But then when they don't like the Constitution, they say, well, we need additional legislation to enforce it. Since when? What part of the U.S. Constitution needs you to write legislation to make the words of the Constitution true or to come alive? It's just such an obvious... Okay. Just kidding. Troll, we're getting trolled. Okay. That's good. It's such an obviously on its face stupid fucking claim.
So he's going to... I think he just saw this, which is why he thought that's quite funny. He was like, it's all self-executing. Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe not.
How could you even say that? Section 5 was a huge part. I don't even know. Maybe he hasn't read any of the underlying court cases. Oh, actually, fuck me. He hasn't read any of the underlying court cases. I just realized that. Because when I said that the reason why they rejected this argument, the reason why they axed Section 3 is because it'd be mighty inconvenient to enforce. And I said that was their primary argument. I think I'm being cheeky when I say that. I don't think that was their primary argument. The primary argument, I think it was a 20-page ruling. It's a short ruling. The primary argument that they used was, well, Congress actually has Section 5, has the ability to write a legislation. And he never brought that up in the past. He probably hasn't read that ruling. And that's why he didn't bring that talking point up, because he doesn't even know the talking point because he didn't actually read it. But yeah, this was a big part. I think Section 5 was the big part of the ruling. And I think that's what Roberts ended up resting his opinion on was, I think Roberts was who wrote the majority of that. He was like, listen, if Congress really wants to forbid an insurrectionist or whatever from taking office, then Congress can write a law enforcing it like it's listed out here in Section 5 of the 40th Amendment. I think is what was in the ruling. But fuck, I'm one guy so hard right now. However, oh God, you triggered the fuck out of me. I'm getting re-triggered. Sometimes for these early amendments, they did write, you are correct, they wrote, the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So if Congress wanted to, they could write an additional law to support some of the things in this amendment, but that doesn't mean they need to. That doesn't mean that this section is not in effect unless Congress writes a law for it.
True.
Okay?
That's true. That's absolutely
That's what
true.
this language means. And you know how
Undebatably true.
I know that? You know how I know that the
How does he know that? That's a very legal question, whether text is self-executing. It's not something that's intuitively obvious. So how does
It's not intuitively. If the Constitution says no person shall be this thing, you're like, well, what do they mean by shall? Are we Jordan Peterson legal analysis? Well, when they say no person, well, a person can be a great many thing, and shall. Well, when they say shall, is this when we ask the teacher, can we go to the bathroom? And the teacher says, you mean may you go to the bathroom? Or is this an institution where we're asking the Balrog if he can pass or shall he not pass? And what is it? Like, what the fuck are you talking? That's ambiguous to you? You shall not do this thing. That's ambiguous? Well, what does he mean by shall not? Do you know what it is? It's a vibe. It's exactly what I said at the beginning of this. It's all a vibe. It's all a vibe. And he gave the whole game away. It's not immediately clear what shall means. Why? Because that's not how you vibe it out? It is a vibe. Thank you, Ryan, for showing everybody that it's a vibe.
this language means. And you know how I know that? You know how I know that the...
How does he know that? That's a very legal question, whether text is self-executing. It's not something that's intuitively obvious. So how does he know that? Great question.
What's in the amendment is true and real, and you don't need a law necessarily to enforce it. You know how I know that? Because that's what Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was. And Alito used the exact opposite argument when he didn't like Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. He said, well, there's actually tension between the law, the appropriate legislation. There's actually some tension between that and Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. We don't think Congress should have been allowed to write that law. So when it comes to presidential immunity, whoa, we need a law to enforce Section 3. By the way, no, you fucking don't. Show me that anywhere in here. It's not in here. It's not a single place here that says this isn't in effect unless Congress writes law for it. That's not true, okay? But when Congress does write laws to enforce into the Constitution, 14th and 15th Amendment, Alito says, well, actually, why do we need that law?
Oh, that was a mistake. That should have been presidential immunity. That should have been the president being elected again. Whoops.
Let's just look at the 14th and 15th Amendment. That's why it's all vibes and it's all bullshit. It's
True.
all vibes and it's all bullshit. And
True.
it's all vibes and it's all bullshit.
True.
Okay?
True.
It's all
True.
vibes and it's all bullshit. They use whatever
Absolutely
fucking
true.
argument they want.
True.
And at the end of the day, the strongest argument they had in this case was that it would be mighty inconvenient for states to selectively ban presidents from the ballot. Okay? Sorry, I'm not trying to shout at you in particular. You are right that that's the argument he used, but you don't have to pass a law. The language is plain. Remember, rule number...
Okay. So Destiny, again, made it very clear that law is all vibes. It's all vibes, 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 it's all vibes. And then he presented a few arguments. His main argument...
23 minutes and 46 seconds into the video. Are we going to get some original lawyer-approved Ryan Malele arguments here instead of him just saying, well, he's wrong because he's retarded? Okay, let's go.
Is that Section 3 is obviously, in his opinion, self-executing such that it doesn't matter that in Section 5, the 14th says that Congress can pass laws to enforce this article, and that it's obviously self-executing. Now, keep in mind, what Destiny's arguing is that Section 3, which says no person shall be senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the...
By the way, that's also how shall not, right? I gave the 22nd Amendment as an example. This is also how the language is read in the rest of the Constitution. And in our goal for constitutional analysis, one of the things that we aspire to is harmonious language, that when a word is used in multiple places, ideally it means the same thing. This would bring our legal interpretation into harmony, and it would be wonderful and beautiful if we didn't define the exact same sentence as meaning legally separate things in different parts of the document without having a really good reason to do so.
Constitution of the United States shall engage in insurrection or rebellion against the same or give aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. Okay. It is not clear to me on a reading that is self-executing for the states, that the states have the power to determine who is and who is not an insurrectionist against the United States.
Then that's your fault. That's your problem. You can say that that's your issue, but again, how do states determine a person's age? How do states determine a person's birthplace? These are also issues related to whether or not you can be on the ballot, correct? Right? Are you a citizen? You have to be born in the United States, right? Does the Constitution provide, am I missing that? Does the Constitution provide and Congress shall go to each state. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and between 14 years a resident within the United States. Who determines that? Do the states go to Congress and ask them that question? Does the state go to the federal government and ask them that question? States do that one all on their own.
Not an insurrectionist against the states, but an insurrectionist against the United States itself. And it would make sense that the branch that would determine what the laws are for whether or not someone has been declared an insurrectionist against the United States would be the United States, not each individual state. And what he calls mere convenience is a recitation of that principle. There's going to be states in the Union that have differing opinions, but who's an insurrectionist against the United States would be best decided by the United States itself rather than by the several states. And then he made another argument, which was that in the VRA case, Justice Alito looked at the VRA.
I'm sorry. 14th Amendment. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, okay, or elector of president and vice president. Okay, those are your state's electors. I guess that's still kind of federal, maybe. Or hold any office, civil or military. Any office, civil or military. Does that include local office? Maybe not. Under the United States. Oh, okay, so this is still just federal. Or under any state. Oh, or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress, or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, judicial officer, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, that's not the federal level, to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. So you're saying that we need to... Oh, wait. But they even put a thing at the end here. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such a disability. Why would Congress need to vote to remove such a disability when they haven't even given a law saying that that disability could exist? Because this is just words on paper, right? It doesn't mean anything until another law is written. Why would you be able to remove this if they haven't even gotten to the point of writing legislation to actually effect any of it? And are you telling me that I need to go to the federal government now to determine whether or not I feel like a person who had taken a state oath or something as a member of any of my state legislatures? Am I not allowed to have that opinion as a state? That has to be a determination made by the United States of America? What if I, as a state, have a differing opinion on that? Am I not allowed to have a differing opinion on that? What if it was the case that Ryan was right? What if Ryan was correct on this, and it actually was up to the Congress to decide this? Well, what if the Congress decided this by a simple majority, but all of the offices in question were in states that voted against it? What if all of the blue states got together with a few red states and decided that all of these people were oath breakers and they couldn't hold office, but they were trying to hold office in the states of Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi, who all voted the other way? Is the Congress now going to tell those states individually who they're allowed to have on their ballots for any office, local offices and state offices? But what am I? I'm just a fucking retard, I guess. I don't know. Hey, I'm trying to read over here. I'm a fucking retard.
Which was that in the VRA case, Justice Alito looked at the VRA, compared it to Section 14(1) of the Voting Rights Act. Let me take this down so I can get you Section 1 of the Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. I think it'll be easier if I can show you the full text here. So 14th Amendment text. Let's pull this up. So the 14th Amendment, look at the difference. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. That's obviously self-executing language. Why? It tells you how the rule is operationalized. It tells you that
Is it going to keep reading?
these people are birthright citizens. It is.
Okay.
Now, I disagree with the meaning that it's used to this, but it's not. I don't disagree with self-executing.
Okay.
This is straight up self-executing language.
Okay.
No state shall make or enforce
Shall
any law which abridges the privileges and immunities, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property. This is putting constitutional restrictions on the federal government and on the states. Again, it's creating a standard by which courts can decide whether or not a state or the federal government has in fact violated the Constitution. That's pretty.
So it's a restrict. Oh, we're making shit up. This is the reason why I said that this was all vibes is because this is what I mean when you talk to these people, right? They try to pretend that we're all about strict textual interpretation and this is the only way to read the Constitution. But when it comes to for them to interpret things the way they want, it is the living, breathing document. This document is alive, sir. We've got a pulse and everything. This motherfucker is spitting new law to justify his dog shit fucking opinions on all of this. Oh.
Different than this one, because the question here is, how do you know whether someone's engaged in an insurrection?
No.
What do you mean? That's not the question. It didn't ask that question here, did it? How do you know if somebody's 35? How do you know if somebody's a citizen of the United States? How do you know? That's not provided for in the Constitution either.
How do you know? Well, you'd have to have some kind of standard, some kind of crime, some kind
True, you would.
of law
Yep.
that would permit a court to find that someone was an insurrectionist.
Correct. And you know what? That would be up to each and every state to decide. But you know what, Ryan? Thank God the people that wrote these amendments and made the Constitution aren't as fucking retarded as you think they are. Because let's assume that there was some chaotic thing. What if like 2 or 3 states were like, we're going to fucking write this guy off, okay? Citing the Section 3 of the 14th. Fuck this guy. We're going to keep him off the ballot. They were so smart. They were like, well, how about we do this? What if we say that Congress, if they get 2/3 of the vote of the House and the Senate, can remove this disability so a state couldn't use this in order to kick somebody off the ballot? And now oh my goodness, the problem is solved right here. It's almost like they were writing shit because they knew what the fuck they were doing. Maybe.
And that begs the question of who has that power. So comparing Section 4...
Who ordinarily has the power? Who ordinarily has the power to decide who does or doesn't go on the ballot? Who enforces that? Who makes those determinations?
14 Amendment Section 1 and 14.3, the arguments for 1 being self-executing in the way that Stephen's talking about, and 3 are entirely different. And the strength of the arguments here are not the same as the strength here. Then, keep in mind, Alito, when he was comparing the VRA to Section 14, was not at all saying that Section 14 was a freestanding law. What he was saying is, you can't pass a law that violates the Constitution. You can't pass a law that violates the Constitution.
Oh, I didn't know that. Fuck me. You can't pass a law that violates the Constitution. Oh, fuck. True. Who decides if it's violating the Constitution again? Oh, the Supreme Court. How convenient. Very sneaky.
Breaking news! Breaking news! Breaking news! Breaking news! Huge breaking news!
That's way too long. You can't pass a law that violates the Constitution, guys, okay? Don't forget it.
Now, what did the justices do in the Can Trump be on the ballot case? They said Colorado can't do something that violates the Constitution. It's not a bad or asymmetric comparison in the way that Stephen is implying. I just don't think he is. I think he's operating on a fairly surface level in terms of like analysis of these issues. And
Surface level. He should have told that to the people who wrote there were multiple amnesty acts that were written. This is part of that when I jokingly made fun of that Paulson and Baud paper. They go through this. There were multiple congressional acts that were written in order to forgive the insurrectionism of the insurrections of the past as part of Reconstruction. Now, the real question is, why did these retarded fucks in Congress write laws to remedy injuries when people weren't writing laws to enforce the injuries? Were they all mistaken back then? Because also, by the way, another way that you check to see what a law meant was you go back in time and you see how the legislature acted in accordance with the court after certain amendments or laws were passed. It can give you a great deal of insight into what the states and what the federal government and what the Supreme Court thought about the laws at the time. You can see how they were operating, right? There were multiple amnesty acts that were written. I think somebody linked just one of them. There were multiple amnesty acts that were written right here. The Amnesty Act of 1872 is a United States federal law passed on May 22nd, 1872, which removed most of the penalties imposed on former Confederates by the 14th Amendment. But this is so stupid because why? Why would they have to do this? Shouldn't they have just known that it's not self-executing, that stuff written in the Constitution just for funsies anyway? Like,
as a result, he's just a little bit confused.
Oh, I'm just confused. Good arguments, dude.
About what this is all about. Let's put it that way. I think that's probably fair. That's trying to be nice to Tiny.
I'm glad at the very least, because I'm just a fucking retard to play video games for most of my life. I'm glad we got somebody that went to law school to break it down with the hard-hitting legal arguments, right? Like, I'm like on the edge of my seat, okay, trying to follow the sophisticated legal narratives that this guy is spitting for me from his boundless imagination, or I'm sorry, I should say reservoirs of knowledge, not imagination, okay, reservoirs of knowledge about the law. Thank you so much. So generous with his time.
Maybe I shouldn't be.
Number 1 for constitutional interpretation, okay? For all legal interpretation, I believe. When the text is clear and unambiguous, you follow the text. Full stop. When the text is clear and unambiguous, you follow the text. Wow, but what does shall not mean? That's it.
Where does this text say that states are empowered to determine who is an insurrectionist?
Who normally determines ballot qualifications? Like, what's next? It didn't specify the color of the pen. It didn't specify
what language it had to be written in. I don't know. Like, who ordinarily determines what goes on a ballot? What is the language of the 22nd Amendment? You could go through all of them and find similar language. Language and amendments, like things kind of like change over time depending on, I don't know, depending on what, but Constitution of the United States, 22nd Amendment. No person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the office of the president more than once. But this article shall not apply to any person holding the office of president when this article was proposed by the Congress, and shall not prevent any person who may be holding the office of president or acting as president during the term within which this article becomes operative from holding the office of president or acting as president during the remainder of such term. Where does this say anything about? Do the states determine if you've held the term twice? Does this say anything in here? Am I missing it? Did I miss something in here? Where it says the states are the ones who make that determination? Is this even a real law? Maybe this is bullshit. Maybe this is even real. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But the reason why this is all confusing is because this is vibes. These are all vibes, okay?
On a federal level.
On a federal level, okay? Federal level. Yeah, it's the Constitution. Thank you, Ryan.
One of the big questions in law is, when is a text sufficiently ambiguous that you can't just rely on the text? You have to use other interpretive tools. I don't think he's presented an argument about why this is so clear.
Because we all know in the plain you can pass every single threshold. You can pass all 3 tests. That's what the whole point of that paper was, that you also haven't read, was that you can pass the clear and unambiguous text. You can pass the tradition of the law. You can go and look, well, what was Congress doing at the time? They were passing laws to remedy the injury that was allotted for in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, showing that they had that understanding at the time as well. You can pass every threshold, every test that you want to imagine was exceeded by this. Like, why don't, wait, hold on, I'm being unfair. Maybe Ryan will suggest an alternative reading and then support it with either some other part of the Constitution, some other law, some other contemporaneous understanding of what this meant at the time, some other contemporaneous legislature activity, federal legislature activity. Maybe he will. Okay, I'm jumping the gun. He might. Okay, he might.
That there's no interpretive tools needed.
Wait, what other interpretive tools? Excuse me.
Who is an insurrectionist? On a federal level.
Okay. Federal level, by the way. Federal level.
One of the big questions in law is, when is a text sufficiently ambiguous that you can't just rely on the text? You have to use other interpretive tools. I don't think he's presented an argument about why this is so clear.
So, like, because I'm just a retard. Remember, I'm just a retard. Why don't you give us an example of another test that we should be deploying here, and then show us how you would use that test? Wouldn't that be, like, if you were a very educated person, like, wouldn't that be the thing that you would do to demonstrate why you're credentialed and why your credentials fucking matter? Is to demonstrate, here's another way you could view this. And if you view it from this perspective using this tool, here's another answer that you could arrive at. Wouldn't that be like a really cool way to actually show that you went to school and you actually got an education on a topic, and then you can actually bring out your knowledge on that topic to illustrate a point, maybe?
That there's no interpretive tools needed.
But it doesn't matter. Okay, none of this actually matters. It's all memes.
True.
And it's all trolls.
It is. It was. I did so much more legal analysis in this video than Ryan did, that Ryan even had to pause this in the beginning. He's like, hey guys, should I actually break this stuff down for you? Do you guys need me to break this stuff? I could do this if you guys want me to. Like, if you guys need me to explain it. Like, I feel like I've done more legal shit in this than fucking Ryan has. I don't know if he's corrected me on a single thing legally. All of his arguments against me sound like layman slop. No offense, but they sound like layman slop. I'm not hearing an example of anything where it's like, oh, I didn't even consider that, actually. That's a pretty good argument. He hasn't even read the underlying fucking cases.
Oh, he's taken out the 14th
I'm sorry, not underlying cases. He's even read the primary cases that are being referenced. He's even read the actual things, let alone any underlying material. But that's whatever.
Oh, he's taken out the 14th Amendment case. There's a lot of 14th Amendment cases. You probably need to be a little bit more specific about
But
that.
if you don't like the text, though, then you don't do it. 20 pages, by the way, to axe this part of the. I think even Amy wrote that. I feel like you guys kind of went kind of far.
Oh, he really wanted me to struggle finding this one. Like, this wasn't the most, like, explosive, relevant, recent case that had been brought up. Okay.
Are you right? Was this the one where she did? Or I could be thinking of the immunity case, actually. Oh, yeah, no, that's right. Because in this one, props to Kagan.
It was 9-0. It was a 9-0 decision. How's he going to spin this was a 9-0 decision?
Oh, it was 9-0. Fuck. I thought he was a legal guy. I didn't know he was a fucking math major. I didn't know this guy was doing fucking linear algebra and fucking topography in the 9th grade. I didn't know this dude was a fucking Calc 3 DVQ after diapers guy. I didn't know that we were getting the mathematical and out. My bad. What a fucking moron I was. Holy shit. I thought we were getting the legal 9-0. How could you?
I don't believe that.
Just kidding. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm not going to get one guide anymore by this guy till the end of this video. We're not watching that much more of this.
to Sotomayor, and props to Jackson.
His argument. I know you're making this argument, but have you considered that you just got brutally ratioed 9-0 by the Supreme Court?
They realized how important it was for us to come together as Americans and come all over the Constitution collectively. Thank God this was a 9-0 per curiam. Every justice came together and realized how important it was to avoid the mighty inconvenience.
True.
Anybody remember the... Oh my God.
And I even remember the word. He didn't remember the word because he didn't say it. But I remember because I read this.
Anybody remember the word they used?
Oh, wait. Maybe he will.
When
Maybe
do
he'll
conservatives
remember.
think about federalism? Ugh.
True.
Before he goes on this particular rant,
Yeah.
let's
Oh.
just take stock.
Oh, we're going to get a legal argument. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Thank God. Okay. Legal argument time. Finally, we're going to get some real legal arguments.
Of what Destiny just said. And remember, this is why I'm taking the
The math field is topology, not topography. You just haven't made it far enough in topology to get to topography. So slow down there. Back the fuck up, little bro. Back up, little bro.
court. Let's just take stock of what Destiny just said. And remember, this is why I'm taking the court packing claims that they're making seriously. Because Destiny just said that even though this was a 9-0 opinion that the liberal justices joined, he still thinks it's not good enough. He thinks that it's a bad thing and that it should.
Yeah, because of the merits of the opinion. Do you ever talk about that? Or is it enough for you to say 9-0 and that's it? I don't need a legal analyzer for that. You could just read the number. What is the point of lawyer guy saying 9-0, 9-0, 9-0?
It's all vibes. It's fucked up. It's it's an absolute joke because he says so. It's a 9-0 decision. If he's not going to accept 9-0 decisions are the result of a valid legal process, what would he accept?
I don't know. A valid legal argument? Isn't that what we have you for?
Other than just agreeing with him, right? If a 9-0 decision doesn't satisfy you, bipartisan as it gets, if a 9-0 decision isn't enough, then on what basis would he ever accept a decision that disagreed with his personal opinion?
I mean, I thought the Loper decision, I thought that was written pretty well, even though apparently all the libs are opposed to that and they prefer the Chevron stuff. I thought that was probably an acceptable opinion, even though I think I kind of disagree with it. I don't think it was 9-0. But
Well, the law doesn't have to agree with Destiny's personal opinion, and it shouldn't. That's not
true. It just agrees with the personal opinion of the Supreme Court. Based.
the law does. We're not in business of agreeing with Destiny.
Federal government.
Thank you so much for clarifying.
States' rights. Yes. Every state has its own constitution, its own executive, its own legislature. That's so fucking awesome that we can have this beautiful quilt of a nation. But what do we call it when Section 3 might become? Well, now it's a patchwork. Oh my God. We're not going to have a complete and total congruence in every single state on this particular issue that would keep Daddy Trump out of office. Today, the court departs from that vital principle, deciding not just this case, but challenges that might arise in the future. In this case, the court must decide whether Colorado may keep a presidential candidate off the ballot on the ground that he's an oath-breaking insurrectionist and thus disqualified from holding federal office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Allowing Colorado to do so would, we agree, create a chaotic, state-by-state patchwork at odds with our nation's federalism principles. Oh my God, yes.
Yes. Da-na-na, What's the Metal Gear Solid
He
song?
seems very, very upset.
I am upset because I think this is a bullshit legal argument. It's not a real legal argument. It's an argument from convenience. I can't think of a single fucking thing that would be more anti-textualism, anti-originalism than an argument from convenience. That sounds like a living, breathing, beautiful constitution that I can reinterpret whatever whim I have if I decide that it inconveniences me enough, which is supposed to be the thing that you fuckers are against.
He seems very, very upset about the fact that the Supreme Court
unanimously. Man, he really likes that 9-0 there. Oh, he really likes that one.
unanimously disagrees with him. I'm very upset by that. Big upset by that. Don't know why he's so upset by that yet, but he's very upset by that. I mean, I guess the obvious answer is that he's upset that he's not getting exactly what he wanted.
Oh, you're not going to actually deal with the argument that I gave. Oh, you're just going to go personal and say that I'm just mad, big mad. Okay, that's cool. Well, I'm glad we have a lawyer here to give us the mathematical analysis, the 9-0, and now the psychological analysis. Okay, let's get some psychology going on here. Anything but the actual legal argument. Well, I guess he did give the legal argument before, which was, shall can be a difficult word to understand, I guess.
Now, one of the interesting things about this is it looks like he is not reading the main opinion. He's reading a concurrence. See how it says at the top of the screen, Jackson concurring into judgment? So he's reading the concurrence by Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson.
Yes, I've already read this whole decision on stream. Is he going to do the thing again where he's not going through the whole thing? Like, yeah.
They agreed with the judgment, but they wrote separately. Why is he starting with the concurrence? Remember, he's complaining about the
Because I'm not rereading the entire opinion?
rationale. He's complaining about the logic of this case, but he's not actually reading the main opinion. Why on earth would you start with the concurrence and then criticize the reasoning of the main opinion? You're not even looking at the main opinion. Now, does he know that he's looking at the concurrence?
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe he just found this quote he likes, he wants to talk about this, but keep in mind,
Oh, I just found the quote that I wanted, even though I said before I even opened the decision that he thought I was going to have trouble finding that the word they used was patchwork to represent how chaotic it would be to have all the states trying to decide how to do this enforcement on their own. But I guess that was a quote that I found before. No one even talks about these fucking decisions, by the way, because nobody even reads these fucking decisions, by the way, which is what drives me the most crazy. But at the very least, I've got people like Ryan who can give us good faith legal analysis. Like 9-0 is bigger than any other Supreme Court thing, and shall is a very ambiguous word, and you're big mad.
this is not the main opinion. Interesting, that's what he's choosing to focus on.
Oh, federal. Yeah, true. It's just such a joke, bro. None of this matters. Don't even waste your time on any of this shit.
It's funny because if he wanted to bolster his argument, if he'd actually read the main opinion, I'm pretty sure the main opinion had to do with that bullshit Section 5 about how Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. That was, he could have cited this here to bolster the earlier argument that he gave, but I don't think he's even read this opinion, so he doesn't even know that. But, you know, whatever. There's a tip for next time, dipshit.
It's all retarded anyway. This is literally all retarded shit.
It's all retarded shit.
Yep, it is.
Don't waste your time on this.
True.
It's all retarded shit.
Exactly. It is true. It is. Because why would you waste your time reading any of this? By the way, if you're wondering why waste your time with Ryan here, because if Alito himself were streaming, it would be exactly the same shit that Ryan is saying. This would be an Alito stream. He'd be like, well, you know, did Congress and the Constitution kind of see this as this for 37 years? You know, I mean, maybe, but like if you read it, it's kind of fuck shit, isn't it? Isn't it like kind of fuck shit the way that like it seems like kind of like I don't know what the fuck is going on here. It kind of seems like it's in tension with like the 14th or 15th Amendment. I don't actually know. It's kind of bullshit. Section 2 of the voter. It would be basically this would be Alito streaming. So don't even feel bad. Okay, this is worthwhile.
So what did Destiny just do with his stream? Did he show them the majority opinion and walk them through the logic of it and then disagree? Did he say why it is that the main opinion was wrong? No.
Also, I think technically, if he has issues with majority opinion and concurrence, he should be saying the difference between holding and dicta, because it could be that the holding actually does agree with the concurrence written here, or it could be that there was a holding, the main text that was written to address what was actually before the court, that they wanted to issue a strong holding on, the holding there, and then that holding could actually completely align with the concurrence that's written that also agrees with the holding, and that part of the chaotic Patrick was a holding. Or it could be that it was dicta, but he's saying original opinion here, which is not technically correct for what he's trying to insult me on.
No. What he did is he showed them the concurrence, which is not the main opinion, complained that the concurrence didn't meet his standards, and then said it's all retarded and took it off screen before his chat could realize the game he's playing, where he
We've gone over... Like, what are we saying here? He sneakily Googled this decision so that he could zip on down. Like, who in my chat? Like, what do you, like, hold on. I'm so sorry. I wish I could have like a 30-minute talk with Chud Logic over the weird conspiracy he believes about me. Just because I would love to dive into these people's minds. Just imagine what Ryan is like envisioning here, okay? Imagine what the mind game going on here. So there's a fan of mine who's like arguing valiantly, like, oh, I know that this amendment was overturned for bad reasons, and it's because they just talked about the patchwork of things or whatever. Got him. And it's like Destiny's like, yes, I have misled my audience successfully on how much I hate this opinion. That was a 9-0 opinion, by the way. So I'm like really kind of out on an island there. I recognize that. I'm very much out on an island, okay, on this 9-0 opinion. But if I can just go to a concurrence and then read part of the concurrence that I don't like, I bet my fans will carry that part of the concurrence forward into future debates and own people for it by misrepresenting what the actual holding was of the majority opinion written by the court. Like, what do we... Maybe this was just a part that exceptionally triggered me because I thought it was a really fucking bad argument. Isn't that exactly what I said? Like, the thing that I think ignores me, or I'm sorry, the thing that triggers me the most for these people is they just ignore the words that I say that actually perfectly describe my actions. Like, God, they had this part that they wrote in the, I did think it was in the majority, by the way. It might actually be if I go back and look. And maybe in the concurrence they use that patchwork, but they don't use that phrase in the majority. I have to go back and check as part of the holding. But the, maybe it's just that I was really triggered by this one phrase because I thought it was really hypocritical because it illustrates the same point I was going through earlier. Isn't that like more probably what happened? Rather than you think I'm intentionally trying to snipe phrases out of the concurring opinion in order to mislead my audiences about a 20-page Supreme Court decision that was written for how many years ago? Not 4 years ago, I don't remember. Like, it's like so conspiratorial. Why?
He's not even bothering to show them the actual case. Not even bothering to show them the actual case. So this is what I mean when I say that, like, you have to be careful when...
Also, man, if you're getting mad about people mischaracterizing Supreme Court cases by just reading the concurrence, I swear to God, you better not fucking take anything that fucking Roberts or Alito or Thomas or any of these fucking losers talk about when they're writing their opinions, because these motherfuckers love concurrence. They love dissents, and they love dicta more than anything else in the world. They love to quote the most irrelevant fucking shit or half quote it out of a Supreme Court case and pretend like it was fucking relevant to any question before the court at that time. They love it, but... you know,
you start listening to legal analysis on the internet because there are people who are just winding you up and gaslighting you.
Yeah, like you are. Why don't you give us some real legal analysis? Tell me why I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong on this.
This guy is unironically projecting. He's saying, this is all vibes. This is all
I'm projecting.
winding you up and gaslighting you. This guy is unironically projecting. He's saying, this is all vibes. This is all nonsense. But his analysis is actually all vibes and nonsense. He's not actually giving you any analysis. He's obfuscating the analysis, hiding the ball from you, hiding the decision from you, and then saying it's all vibes, which of course it is.
I don't even know if the stream was hardcore legal analysis. I think somebody just asked me to like summarize the thing. Like I said, we've read through these entire cases on stream. They take days to go through just because I have to read a lot of the underlying stuff as well. Like,
obfuscating the analysis, hiding the ball from you, hiding the decision from you, and then saying it's all vibes, which of course it is. It's all vibes if you don't actually engage with anything the justices actually wrote about. This is a dangerous thing to do to your audience. And he has a very large audience. But this is why, when you run into people with fucking retarded takes on the internet about law, this is why. Because they're getting fed a steady diet of absolute fucking nonsense.
It's like, this is what makes me feel crazy. This is like what actually like makes me feel insane, is that he's so comfortable projecting exactly what he's doing onto me. And he is a lawyer. This guy actually went to law school. So he should know, like, in my mind, and I don't give anybody this credibility anymore, I can't believe it took me 37 years of life, 36 years, I don't know when I finally started to realize this, that having a college degree or a postgrad actually just didn't mean shit, and I just gave these people way more credibility. My assumption would have always been that, like, you have a JD, you can run circles around me on any legal argument at all, just because I don't have the education. Like, you can make shit up and I wouldn't be able to counter it, I guess. That would be my assumption, right? But, like, this is 37 minutes of how I don't know anything about the law, and there hasn't been one, like, legally supported fact in this entire fucking video about how wrong if this is so dangerous and so horrible, then why not like point this out with some level of substance? No?
And then they're like, oh shit, law's all vibes. Well, if you believe what Destiny's saying.
He's live now with Rob Noor talking about you disagreeing with 9-0 decisions. No shot, bro. Shut the fuck up. You're trolling me.
Yelling about.
No shot. Stop. No shot.
Suddenly reversing everything and taking away all the rights that you hold dear, and you have no recourse. You have nothing you can do. There's nowhere you can go. There's no process you can avail yourself of. Then why would anyone listen to what the law says? It would be silly, right? And that's why this is a very different kind of threat. This is not the sort of thing that you can take lying down. Like, this is the sort of thing that nobody should be willing to say out loud, because it's a red line, and if you cross it, you're getting into extraordinarily dangerous territory. So I don't know, Rob. I'm hoping that maybe they get, like, this polls badly or they back off, but like right now it seems like they're barreling towards this full speed. And can I tell you a story?
Yeah, sure.
Rambling.
Yeah.
I was talking shit about Destiny the other night because I was reviewing some truly awful legal takes he took, but it's indicative of this problem. Remember when they tried to take Trump off the ballot in Colorado?
I did.
They said, oh, Trump's an insurrectionist. Colorado says so. And it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court looked at the Constitution and said, I mean, like, you can get into all the legal reasoning, but even as a matter of just common sense, if...
Oh! Before, when he was doing the illegal house before, remember... I don't know what shall means. That's just super not clear to me. Sometimes, what did he say? Hold on. What did he say? Sometimes we have to deploy an alternative lens of analysis. Is that what he said? An alternative legal, was it outlook or I thought it was lens. What did he say? It's not clear what that word means. Fuck, what was the phrase that he used? He used a phrase. I thought he said you could do a different lens or something. Was it not lens? Fuck. Or framework? Wait, maybe it was framework. No. Fuck! Check 11245. What? No, this is not even that. Just search the transcript? I tried to, but I can't. Fuck. What was the phrase that he used? I hate searching this thing. It doesn't tell me. Fuck. I don't remember. I need to be able to scroll back up. I don't remember what it was. But he said that he was arguing, correctly by the way, that sometimes you can look to more than just the language, the plain language, for different reading. But now when he's talking about it, now it's just common sense, right? Now it's just common sense. Oh, I didn't know it was common sense. Alternative? No. Fuck. It must not have picked up the tool. It must not have picked up the word that he used. Fuck. Try searching common lens. It didn't pick it up. Oh, I'm triggered. You know what? I don't care. I had nothing better to do with my night. We're going to go back and find it. Hold on.
The arguments for one being self-executing in the way that Steve did. Then keep in mind, Alito, when he was comparing the
He said perspective. It's not showing up in the transcript, so it must not have picked it up. I'll find it. I don't care.
VRA to Section 14 relates the Constitution. It's not he is bad or asymmetric comparison in the way that Stephen is implying. I just don't think he is. Well, he's just a little bit trying to do interpretation of tiny.
When the text
Determine who is on the text, you have to use other interpreters.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Sometimes the text is not clear. Okay, hold on. Where were we? Okay.
On a federal level. One of the big questions in law is when is the text sufficiently ambiguous that you can't just rely on the text? You have to use other interpretive tools. I don't think he's presented an argument about why this is so clear that there's no interpretive tools needed.
Exactly. I have not given a compelling argument for why this is so clear that you don't need to use an interpretive tool. And then remember, I just paused the stream and I asked, and I was like, well, why wouldn't he suggest a different interpretive tool to use? Wouldn't that be interesting? But now he finally has given us a better interpretive tool. And that interpretive tool was...
To take Trump off the ballot in Colorado?
I did.
What was the
Trump's
other interpretive tool?
Colorado says so. And it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court looked at the Constitution and said, I mean, like, you can get into all the legal reasoning, but even as a matter of just common sense.
Common sense was the other tool. I didn't even consider that one. Oh my God. How stupid am I? Fuck me.
If one state can take the president off the ballot, then all states are going to start doing it, and we'll never have another presidential election. It's going to be an absolute shit show forever.
But that's not true, though, right? Because isn't there literally built in to that amendment the ability for Congress to remedy such injury, to remove such disability? Hasn't Congress literally passed multiple laws in the past doing exactly that thing? So, in all your wisdom, maybe the guys that were writing these amendments and these laws knew a little bit more about it than you did. Maybe.
It's an untenable rule. It is a disaster waiting to happen. And the court ruled that was unconstitutional. Not
crazy that somehow we functioned with it in the past, even though it was so untenable, so disastrous, so unconstitutional, so ridiculous.
9-0, right?
Now, I can bring up the clear and unambiguous text as I read it. I can bring up prior amnesty laws that were passed that seem to comport with the language of Section 3, removing such disabilities, implying that those disabilities did indeed exist without Congress having to pass a law. We could even go back through my notes, and you could try and find the 120-page fucking paper that I read in preparation. Fuck, I don't know if I have notes on here for it. In preparation for the debate. Fuck, I don't know if I have it. They might be buried in my notes somewhere, right? You could do all that, okay? But instead, I've been overruled by common sense. And then for all of this, to go through all of this, I put in so much, I'm embarrassed to say it. Because I always feel like I don't put in that much work. I think I'm doing a bit above the bare minimum, right? Read a paper, read the Supreme Court decision. Like, I think if you wanted to do a real analysis of it, you would go through there are congressional archives where people are debating the law at the time. You can look at prior language and contemporaneous language when they passed the amendment. Now, this is what the paper that you read hopefully does. They go through all of these detailed analyses. You can read a response paper. I know there was a big response paper written to Paulson and Baud. I don't think I read it. I think I either skimmed it or I might have read like the first few pages, but it didn't seem very compelling to me. Like, this would be like going above and beyond. But I'm doing the bare minimum here, okay? And this guy's response to me is just common sense. This is what? And you're the law school guy? What are you doing here?
Destiny.
Maybe there's more legal arguments past that, though. Hold on.
Say what? A music major who used to clean carpets and looked at, now he has a big stream. And
It's true. And this is the thing that I hate the most about these credentialed guys. I am a music school dropout. If you wanted to debate about any subject in music, I would fucking bury you. But it wouldn't be because I would have to say over and over again, I'm a music school dropout. I'm a music school dropout. I would just start making shit up. And you would have absolutely no fucking idea how to counter any of it. You would have no clue what to say for any of the arguments that I bring up at all because you're not educated in that field whatsoever. Like, I know I can do that 100%. And I wouldn't have to say, again, over and over again, well, I went to music school, and I'm a music school dropout, okay? But that's not an argument. That's just appealing to my credentials, which is fine. I think you can bring up your credentials. But the whole reason you get credentialed is so that you can make the arguments, not just so you can blindly appeal to the credentials.
And he's sitting there going, oh, I can't believe it. The law's all vibes. The Supreme Court, they got it all wrong. They should have kept Trump off the ballot. I know this.
But I've made the arguments for it, and you've made none other than common sense.
In my heart, I know this. It's like 9-0. The three liberal
9-0, yeah. Jesus Christ. 9-0, legal degree. 9-0, JD. 9-0, 9-0, 9-0, JD. 9-0, JD.
justices also said this was
And common sense.
a terrible idea. But you, Destiny, in your infinite wisdom with your carpet cleaning degree and your musicology, you know for sure that every member of the Supreme Court was wrong and you are right as a matter of constitutional law. And that's the sort of hubris we're talking about, Rob, where like even when the court speaks with unanimous voice on the law, it's not good enough because they just want to win. They just want to win.
What a projection.
That's it. And like, by the way, as we speak, Destiny's over on his channel yelling about this very point, watching your video of it, analyzing his terrible points, and making comments like, and this dude went to law school. Yeah. Yes, that's right. You know, and it's even Pisco went to law school, said he predicted they would rule against it, but
I have never in my life heard Pisco in the middle of a debate go, well, I went to law school. I don't even know if those, maybe at one point, but I don't know if I've even heard those words leave Pisco's mouth. I went to law school. No. What a fucking ridiculously absurd thing. Why even compare yourself?
it was a bad decision. They should have. By the way, using their same metric and their same definition of insurrection, we have had dozens of insurrections, dozens, this Trump's term, right? And there were many Democrats that paid lip service to it. So can I gather a challenge here in Pennsylvania? You know, come 2028, when Gavin Newsom runs for office and say, I think he aided and abetted insurrectionists in California, I'd like to keep him off the ballot in Pennsylvania. They would say, yes, that's fair. You can do that. That's what
you would have to go through your whatever process your state has for determining how a person is on the ballot, which is the same thing we do with all the other qualifications. That's correct. By the way, what do we do if the powers that be decide that Trump didn't get 2 fair terms because his first term was sabotaged by the deep state, and then we have to decide whether or not to put him on the ballot? What is our process for enforcing the 22nd Amendment? Show it to me. Point it out in the Constitution. Point it out in federal statute.
it should be. Each state doing this every time. But of course they would say no because we just want power. That's what it's really about. Super chats real quick. Jabroni big time says Justice Jackson is a plot stinky. That's his toddler. That's a word he came up with. It's not flattering.
That's what he did is he showed them that you're not even looking at the main opinion. Now, does he know that he's looking at the concurrence? I don't know. Maybe he just found this quote he likes. He wants to talk about this. But keep in mind, this is not the main opinion. Interesting, that's what he's choosing to focus on.
Oh, federal. Yeah, true. It's just such a joke, bro. None of this matters. Don't even waste your time on any of this shit. It's all retarded anyway. This is literally all retarded shit.
It's all retarded shit. Don't
How far
waste
are we in this?
And then said it's all retarded and winding you up and gaslighting you. The analysis, hiding the ball from you, hiding the decision. Because they're getting fed a steady diet of absolute fucking nonsense. And then they're like, oh shit, law's all vibes. Well, if you believe what Destiny's saying, you might think law is all vibes because the way he's describing it, it sounds like it's all vibes. The problem is he's full of shit.
He said you're scared to debate Limfeo. What if I don't know if I'm friends with everyone on Discord? They can drag me to the call right now, and I just ask him some questions on this if he wants. Go for it. Let me use the bathroom. Hold on. Figure out a way for them to drag me in. I don't give a fuck. Hold on.
Does this audience figure that out? Hey, man, always good to have a Law and Order member subscribing. If you are a fan of Rob, you are a friend of mine, and thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for your generous support. If you haven't subscribed for this base legal coverage, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, Law and Order, the Alliance, the Bulldozer, the Builder, why have you done that yet? Come on, like the stream, subscribe. Makes a huge difference. Thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Okay.
Oh, this ought to be fucking good.
Last line of section 3 is even more explicit, saying for it to not apply, Congress would have to vote on it.
That's
Why
not.
would that be if it wasn't in effect to begin with? For it to not apply, Congress would have to vote on it.
That's not.
Why would that be if it wasn't in effect to begin with? It's just every single time you think that the Constitution will protect you, you should just think of Game of Thrones.
Keep in mind, he gave the game away earlier. He said, compared to Nazi Germany, remember he said this, he said, compared to Nazi Germany, the situation with Trump is worse because Trump won an election and gained power. Now what's he doing? He's complaining that the Supreme Court let Trump run in the election. He's saying the Supreme Court should have stopped Trump from running in the election.
These are two completely separate and not related arguments at all. And I don't even think you disagree with the first one. If you had an authoritarian government that was doing a thing that you consider to be morally bad, and maybe even bad against the core of what it means to be a member of your country, you would probably feel a lot worse if it was done by popular decree, by a 55% majority vote, versus by just one crazy authoritarian leader who managed to finagle his way into power. That's not even that disagreeable of a statement, but he's so locked into debate brain.
That would have been better. It would have been better if the democracy of choice in the election was taken away from the people by the Supreme Court so that Trump couldn't have won. He's literally saying that even though a 9-0 Supreme Court said this was a bad idea, even though a 9-0 Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional and illegal, even though a 9-0 Supreme Court said we must preserve the right of the people to elect the president and not have a patchwork amongst the states, Destiny's saying, holy shit, that led to electing somebody I don't like. Therefore, that's worse than Nazi Germany.
That's what I said. That was my argument the entire time, by the way.
Put the pieces together.
So much good legal argumentation here. Very good legal arguments here.
Put the pieces together. Oh shit, are we getting traction on the algorithm? Guys, we're moving up in the world. We are moving the fuck up in the world. That's no joke. Algorithm traction. Woo! That's big boy talk.
Keep scanning it. That's the U.S. Constitution. Look, this is Alito right here. Libcucks. This guy's a libcuck. That's why he's linking.
True. Fucking true.
Listen to your shield, Lord Stark.
LeMayo.
Now, why do you think his fans support backing the court? Why do you think his fans support backing the court? Because he's told them it's all bullshit. He's told them it's already ruined. He's told them that there's absolutely nothing left of the rule of law. Yeah, the lip cuck thing was funny.
Okay.
That's good.
I don't care about this guy. Let me see. Let me listen for an accent to see if this guy's even going to be able to...
Damn, bro. I will say, you want to talk about a reputation that has been sullied and tarnished? They really went after Sir Barristan. He watches as they rape. Damn. Who's been up on that discourse? Oh, no. Where are my free folk posters? Message them on X. I saw some big Game of Thrones post. It might have been a free folker. Just Sir Barristan is considered like the most honorable fucking dude, and everybody jerks him off all the time. Like, well, didn't this guy just stand by and literally watch all this horrible fucking shit happen? And then now they just go in on him on the subreddits. Okay, they're attacking our boy. Okay, I unblocked Rob on X. The number 67. Oh, stop! You got that to ban meme. I shouldn't do that. Sorry. That's not fair. That's not fair to you guys.
Here is Destiny, goes by the name Steven here. Destiny, you would like to talk to Ryan or me or both, just let us know. Either way is fun.
My buddy, it's been so long. We used to hang out.
Yeah, okay. I was watching your Destiny doesn't know anything about the law, legal analysis. And it was very short of any legal analysis. What was going on there?
Well, you know what, Destiny? It turns out that the law's all vibes, so there just wasn't anything to give analysis to.
That's kind of what I felt like after watching your video.
If it's all vibes, like what are we even here to talk about?
Well, if it's not vibes, then wouldn't the answer to that be to give like legal analysis demonstrating how my opinion is incorrect?
Destiny, your opinion is so transparently incorrect that the entire Supreme Court unanimously voted against you. What is it that you want me to say that wasn't written down in the unanimous court's verdict? And why do you think it is that, a random legal scholar that you read at some point and your own personal opinions would be given any weight in comparison to a unanimous court decision?
So if that's the argument, why am I here? You could just say 9-0 over and over and over again. But you said that you had I have no idea why you're here. You wanted to be here. Okay, so
We had
is
a
the-
lovely scheduled broadcast.
Sure.
You wanted
So
to
is the
pop
the
on.
only point here? Is the only thing you're capable of saying is 9-0 over and over and over again? Is that?
No, Destiny. The point that I would make is that when you have a 9-0 decision, the justices need to come together and find the ground that they are willing to vote on, that everybody agrees on. One of the things that happens when that happens, Destiny, is that the court has different judicial philosophies. So they end up on a lot of 9-0 decisions writing somewhat streamlined opinions because they have to have something that everyone's going to vote on. Just certain justices, like Justice Jackson, love to use legislative history. The originalists won't use it. The liberal justices won't sign on to an originalist opinion. So 9-0s are compromise positions by necessity, but they're also binding and should be transparently, obviously binding because they are 9-0 decisions. It does matter quite a bit, Destiny. So yeah, I do think the burden is on you to articulate a reason other than vibes that the Supreme Court was wrong when it was a unanimous verdict. I mean, if you have an argument for why the Supreme Court was wrong, I'd be delighted to hear you make it. But I can't believe you would think that you actually could carry that burden of proof.
Well, one, I mean, I could just quote the other people that wrote in that decision if I really wanted to. But I also gave some arguments for why I felt like it was not a good decision, and I didn't hear you contend with any of those.
Okay, so if I recall correctly, you thought it was a bad decision because they took into account the fact that if states could remove the president from the ballot, that there would be mass chaos and that elections would become a joke and it would be a quote unquote patchwork. You think that it was problematic that they used that reasoning?
Yes, that would be one part.
Okay.
Yes.
Why is that problematic?
Because that has nothing to do with the original text of the law. It has nothing to do with the original purpose of the law. So why would this be a thing that we would factor in that, oh, this is mighty inconvenient now? My understanding is that's not typically how we read law, that if this is inconvenient to enforce, then we're going to go ahead and toss it.
And which faction on the court is not originalists?
Ryan, are you going to have any responses to my argument?
No.
Or
I think this is a pretty easy question, Destiny. You know the answer. I can tell you the answer if you don't. Which faction on the court?
I'm not interested.
originalist?
I'm asking you, who claimed over and over again to be a lawyer, okay, and I only have my carpet cleaning degree. I'm asking you for what is your rationale for why what I just said was not correct.
I'll answer the question because it's very obvious and you don't apparently want to answer it. The left-leaning faction on the court, Destiny, is not originalist. If they wrote an originalist opinion, they wouldn't have gotten the votes of those justices. So they didn't write an originalist opinion because they needed the votes of people who are not originalists and will not sign off on originalist logic. We saw this happen very recently in the tariff case, which you may or may not have read. But on the tariff case, you had a confusing split between the justices because the liberal justices were not signing on questions theory. Really? That's what we're doing? This is where Destiny asks a question, gets the answer.
I'm back.
doesn't like
I'm going
the
to repeat
answer,
this again. I
and
don't know
then
why you're
uses
having
his music degree.
you're filibustering
Destiny,
because you're
you
not
should
confident. You're really not
should-
confident. You should be able to dumpster me on this. I'm asking a very simple question.
It would be a lot better
You
for
can't
you
answer
to
it. I'll
do
go back.
carpet
I'll go
cleaning.
back.
Go ahead. Feel
Are
free.
you here?
Go back.
Can you answer my question?
If I may,
He
if I may
really
try
can't
to
answer the question.
One
That's
second.
astounding to me.
If I may, I'll try to steal on both sides. Ryan is saying, Destiny, you may be correct that originalists don't really interpret the Constitution like that in law, so this would be unusual for them to make that claim. Ryan's saying, but the originalists didn't just use originalism, they used a language that would be sufficient for these other justices, particularly the left wings, that went along with that. Destiny's argument on top of that's like, okay, Ryan, but put into your own words, basically as someone who claims to be originalist, why that should be part of the argument that's being made. They made this argument that would be against their own originalist intent. Is that fair? That's sort of where we're at?
Yeah. So, Destiny, does that make sense to you that it is not an originalist opinion?
You can speak English and I can speak English. I'm asking a very simple question that we don't need an interpreter for. I'm asking you what is problematic about my assertion that something being difficult to enforce or slightly chaotic is a good reason to get rid of a part of the Constitution. That's a very simple question.
It is a very simple question. The answer that I was giving you had a few parts. I gave you one part. I'm asking if you understood it. Did you understand it?
What did you say that was responsive to my question?
that the reason that they focused on that type of analysis is that it was appealing to the left-leaning justices who would not sign an originalist opinion. That's why the patchwork analysis was highlighted. It's part of the drafting process for a 9-0. Does that make sense to you?
Okay, so then wouldn't you just be agreeing with what I said?
No.
That the
I
patchwork
said
analysis doesn't,
there are
is that,
multiple-
wait, doesn't that mean that the patchwork analysis then is not an originalist opinion? And I was correct in calling out that wasn't an originalist?
It is not an originalist opinion, but that's not
Cool.
because the justices
well, that's
were
fine, that's fine.
inconsistent
Then we
or
agree there.
unoriginalist. It's because they were using the judicial philosophy of the justices that your side likes to appoint because getting a 9-0 was very important.
Gotcha. Okay, so then we agree, right? This is kind of vibing, right?
No, we don't agree that it's vibing.
Hold on. Does a 9-0 decision carry greater weight in law than like a 5-0 decision?
Technically, in many cases, yes. But
So the answer is no.
Not in the way that you're
the answer is
describing.
no, right? So the question is, why would it need to be 9-0 instead of 5-4?
Because it is an incredibly important decision that shaped the democracy. And one of the things that the court was doing was signaling to the country that this is an area where there is consensus across the justices, and that this isn't an area, because when you get a 5-4, people think they can maybe do something a little bit slightly differently. Maybe they could swing a justice to their side. There's room to maneuver. A 9-0 sends a clear signal that this is absolutely inappropriate and unconstitutional, and we cannot have a country where individual states are declaring that the president's an insurrectionist and taking him off the ballot when the Constitution gave the power to enact legislation in that area to Congress. And also,
You're
that it just wouldn't
filibustering.
make any sense.
It's a vibe. You just
for
gave me a
the
vibe answer.
states.
There's no legal
It wouldn't take
reason.
any-
There's not a legal reason.
I just gave you a bunch of legal
No, you
reasons.
didn't. You
You're
gave me a
just
vibe. Hold
calling
on.
them vibes.
Hold on. Wait. What part of what you just said, is a part of our legal system? Is part of law? How would I
Everything
understand
I just
this?
said.
Name one part then. One part of it. If everything was, name one simple part of
Okay.
it. Yes.
Prudential decision making decisions based off of avoiding bad outcomes, is the hallmark of left-leaning legal thought. They needed
You're not.
a
This is
9-0
non-responsive.
decision,
For what?
so
No, they didn't need a
wrote
9-0
in that
decision.
way.
But
They did need a 9-0 decision, Destiny, because
Okay.
that was really important.
Give me an example then.
It was really
Sure.
important.
You're filibustering
that we
again
had- that
because
the
you're not
country
confident.
understand
You're filibustering
that
to a
this
carpet
was
cleaner.
actually
I'm a carpet
big
cleaner.
Deal,
Yep.
and that what
Big deal.
Colorado had
Big deal.
done was wildly inappropriate and was a threat
Okay.
to our system of government.
Okay, I'm
going
just asking
forward.
because I don't know. In federal statute or constitution, is big deal, is that a phrase that's like a really important part of constitutional interpretation or law? Or is that a vibe statement?
No, that's me appealing to your autism and
So then,
carpet cleaning.
so then my question is, from a legal perspective, what difference would it have made if it was a 6-3 or 5-4 opinion versus a 9-0 opinion, legally
Okay,
speaking?
I will try to explain this again.
Okay, legally
When
speaking.
when there is a close decision,
Mm-hmm.
it encourages creative lawyers and creative politicians to do the same thing and structure their actions slightly differently to try to get a different outcome. But when the justices are united, then it shows that there is a clear no from the Supreme Court that this will not be tolerated, and it ends the issue. A 9-0 ends the issue, and this is an issue that needed to be ended. Another example where something like similar
Wait, let me
happened
just
was
so I can
again
understand.
that did not.
Well, I'm trying to understand. I don't need exhibit. I know. I don't need. You're wasting time. You're filibustering. You're filibustering. Let me just. It's a waste of time. Why?
I don't care if it wastes your time.
Why not just address the exact issue? You don't have to use
The
a.
tariff case led almost immediately to President Trump attempting to initiate other tariffs
No relation
because
to
there
what we're
was
talking
not a single unifying
Yep.
rule about why what he did was a violation of the law. So there's a lot of room in the joints to play with. That's the difference between a 9-0 opinion and an opinion that has multiple pluralities and is split in many different ways. I hope that's helpful.
Gotcha. Okay. So let me, in good faith, interpret, okay, what you're saying. If you were to author a 5-4 opinion as opposed to a 9-0 opinion, then you are signaling to lower courts and the potential plaintiffs in the future that they could try to finagle some way through here, where as long as the language was different or they were applying some different test or standard, that maybe this could be ruled on favorably to them in the future. This is why a 9-0 signal is stronger than a 5-4 signal when you're writing.
Other way around, but yeah. 9-0 is a stronger single than a 5-4. But yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let's say that I took what you just said to be true. Okay. Wouldn't the fact that there were like multiple, I think there might have been 4 concurring opinions written, and all of them took an issue with the exact part of the ruling that I'm stating right now I have an issue with, wouldn't that completely undermine the authority of the 9-0 decision that you're hailing as being so sacrosanct?
I actually don't think you're representing that accurately. I think there were concurrences, but as I recall, what they were objecting to was the language that said that it must be this, that there can be no determination on this issue absent a legislation issued by the by Congress.
That was the part that they agreed on?
No, that's the part that I believe that a lot of the concurrences were pointing out that they had a problem with, because they thought it went beyond what was necessary to decide the issue before them, which is whether the state has the power. They all pretty much agreed on. As I recall, the concurrences were criticizing the, I suppose, the conservative wing for going beyond what was necessary to decide the case. I haven't read it.
Wasn't going beyond
from recollection.
Wasn't going beyond it. Wasn't the thing they were pointing out was that Section 5 argument was like really bad?
No, Destiny, you have this backwards.
Okay, hold on. I'm just sorry. Yeah, I understand. I might have it backwards. I'm sorry. Let me read, because Barrett speaks better than I do. I join parts 1 and 2B of the court's opinion. I agree the states lack the power to enforce Section 3 against presidential candidates. That principle is sufficient to resolve this case, and I would decide no more than that. This suit was brought by Colorado voters under state law and state court. It does not require us to address the complicated question whether federal legislation is the exclusive vehicle through which Section 3 can be enforced. Am I misinterpreting that?
No, but that's exactly what I just said.
And also, the thrust of what Ryan's saying here is the originalist or the conservative justices would have agreed without the argument you criticized, which was the patchwork argument. Here is Kagan, the concurrence from Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson. Quote, allowing Colorado to do so, we agree, creates a chaotic state-by-state patchwork at odds with our nation's federalism principles. That is enough to resolve the case. In other words, the left-leaning court justices are the ones that the reason this language was included was to get them on board in a 9-0, and you're saying that's your problem. So even without that patchwork argument, it's still 6 justices, a 6-3, but the patchwork argument is held by the very left-wing justices that you would normally support.
I agree, but the importance that you just gave, that they issue a 9-0 ruling so that they are signaling to everybody around the country how steadfast they are in their interpretation, is immediately betrayed by the concurring opinion authored by the 3 justices that you yourself just said aren't adhering to the same standards as the 5 other conservatives on the court, because Amy also says that they went too far in deciding that Section 5 would be required to enforce Section 3. This is the same complaint that I had. Is Amy a professional carpet cleaner?
Destiny, the point that I was making, and I think that we bottomed this out, so hopefully we're all on the same page, because I said exactly the same thing just now, is that they could have disposed the case on just the question of what Colorado did. The majority went further, yet even though there were concurring justices who had some quibbles with some of the things the majority did, they still signed on to a 9-0 because they were trying to speak with one voice. They could have dissented if they wanted to. They didn't. The reason that they didn't is that it was very important that there be unanimous 9-0 on the core question, which is, could Colorado take Trump off the ballot? And the answer was no.
I agree. I don't disagree with you. But to quote Barrett, the court has settled a politically charged issue in the volatile season of a presidential election. Particularly in this circumstance, writings on the court should turn the national temperature down, not up. For present purposes, our differences are far less important than our unanimity. That sounds like a vibes argument for a 9-0, not a legal argument. And I think that's illustrated by the fact that even Amy only joins the holding in parts 1 and 2B and not the Section 5 argument that you said was so obviously the decider about why this case should have been decided the way that it was. So on that ground, it's a 5-4 decision, not a...
The thing you called vibes, Destiny, was the patchwork phrase. That was the thing that you were saying was a vibes-based argument, and that is the thing that all 9 justices agreed on. So yeah, I think it is fair to criticize you for thinking that you, in your wisdom, find something that 9 justices agree on to be vibes-based and erroneous to the point where it supports your current goal of packing the U.S. Supreme Court full of cronies such that such horrible decisions will never be reached again.
But isn't that how we make our
does strike me
decisions?
as a
Isn't that how
problem.
we make our decisions right now? How do we decide to put somebody on the ballot in a state? Does the federal government tell a state who's allowed to go on the ballot? How do they determine if they're 35 years old? How do they determine if they're, a citizen? Is this,
You're asking how they determine if they're 35
how does a state
years old?
determine this?
I imagine they look at their birth certificate, Destiny.
And the birth certificate records are held by states. So they already do this, right? Is it not that a state could decide that we don't like the birth certificates issued from this state, we don't agree with them? Could they not do that? And there would be...
And what do you think would happen if they did that, Destiny?
That it would be challenged by...
There would be another 9-0 Supreme Court decision saying that you, the state, cannot, in your wisdom, decide that a 36-year-old man is 33 and therefore can't run for president. Like, obviously, that's what would happen. Like, it can't be the case that a state gets to have an arbitrary standard for what 35 years old is and therefore gets to decide who gets to be on the presidential ballot. And if you think that the Supreme Court would have a hard time deciding that one, you've lost your mind.
You think it's arbitrary? What if states would have taken more seriously the argument that Obama wasn't a citizen of the United States and wasn't born here? And a state decided to leave him off the ballot for that. How is
I
a state...
suspect they would have lost 9-0 on that. I suspect they would have lost 9-0 on that. It would have been an easy laughter of a case. It would have been like when the people who were challenging the Virginia Supreme Court, they filed a petition to see if the Supreme Court would overturn the Virginia Supreme Court. They got laughed out of court because it's a frivolous petition. It's an obvious answer, and everybody knows how it's going to turn out. I don't think that would be a difficult challenge at all, Destiny.
So where in the Constitution or where in federal statute does it say that the federal government is allowed to dictate to a state how they determine a person's age?
I imagine, Destiny, that they would simply look at the Constitution and they would issue a very similar decision. In fact, I bet they would cite to this opinion, they would cite the we can't have a patchwork rule, and then they would say, we can't have a patchwork, you guys can't do this,
Yeah.
9-0. But of
That's
course,
fine.
that
If you
would-
want to
that
have
would
this
be a
opinion,
problem
that's
if
fine,
the
but
patchwork thing was just 5.
that's
though.
fine. That's fine. But we're so far away from any original reading of the Constitution. Nobody has understood it to mean these things. The Congress hasn't. The Supreme Court hasn't. This is a new interpretation. In the past, Congress has voted to cure the injury of Section 3 for people that wanted to take office again in the South. They didn't need the Congress to say first these guys were insurrectionists, right? So why did they feel the need to issue a remedy for it as per Section 3, even if it wasn't enforced already as per Section 5?
Destiny, a few things that I think, just to clarify, because there's some misapprehensions there. Again, going back, this decision was not an originalist decision. It was not an originalist decision to get
I'm going to play the piano until you
justices on
respond to
board.
my question.
It's
I don't know why you
obviously
can't
like-
respond. I know
well,
why. It's
'cause
because you're nervous. You
because
can't
keep
respond to the question.
complaining that it's not an originalist decision when it's transparently not an originalist decision for the
Sure.
reasons that I've
So I'm
described.
asking you for
I
a
don't know
legal
why you keep
argument,
saying this.
not for you to keep screaming
The
9-0,
second
9-0.
point, Destiny.
Go ahead.
Once you have a decision on the books, then people can cite to that decision without having to redo the constitutional analysis from scratch. It's a lovely tune, by the way.
Okay.
Is this?
Can you answer a question? You're very
I
bad at
have
this.
Destiny. Some
me restate-
answers to questions take more than one word.
What was my
It
question?
actually
What was
does
my
require
question?
that
What was
I
my question?
articulate the-
What was my question that you just answered? What was it?
You were saying, why is it the case that if the Supreme Court said that you can't monkey around states with the 35 years old rule, that would be some kind of original meaning of the
No,
Constitution?
that's not what I said.
Original
What I
stuff
said was
analysis.
in the past.
Right.
What I said was in the past, the Congress had enacted amnesty legislation to allow prior oath breakers and insurrectionists to hold office again. They didn't need Congress to first pass a law enforcing Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So why would they pass the amnesty if Congress hadn't enforced Section 3 with a Section 5 law?
How did the people become oath breakers, Destiny?
By, I guess the states had determined that they had engaged in insurrection.
After the Civil War?
Correct.
Those were largely federal prosecutions, as I recall, and there were very few of them. There were
There were
mostly
federal, there were
pardons.
mass, correct, yeah, there were not.
Yeah.
But most of these people
Yeah,
were not
so I'm
adjudicated in any
asking
court. Most of
who
these
is
people were
this
not
person that you're
adjudicated.
describing?
Most of these people were not adjudicated in any court to have been insurrectionists. The states had made those determinations. And then
Can you give me an example? Because I'm delighted to take your word for it, but I do not know what you are talking about.
sure, a man named John Smith wanted to run as a state representative in Texas, and they said no. Do you really want an example?
Well, you're making a historical claim with which I am unfamiliar. I don't know that you're right. It's possible you're right, but if you have a historical example, I'd love to have one. Now, Destiny, I assume
Hold on, wait.
John
Can I
Smith
just
is
wait?
not the guy.
No, I just made that name up. But here, just a
Okay.
question. Just a question.
And
Wait,
you're
just a question. Just a question.
looking it up
Just a
because
question.
you're not sure about this?
Yeah, correct. I do not remember the name of every single person that tried to run for. That's not the particular thing. Because, and here's a question. So if I can find an example of a person who was running for office and was blocked without it having been adjudicated in any sort of criminal court, then you would agree then that it seems like they understood that to be self-executing and in effect without there needing to be a law?
That would be a useful piece of historic evidence. I think it's interesting you brought it up without having one. I almost hope you can find one because I think that would be interesting for us to talk about. I think it's telling though that you made the claim without actually having the example.
Well, because I don't remember the exact. Hold on, I just want to be clear so that I understand it. You're saying that my argument here that the Congress passed legislation to remedy a Section 3 injury in the past without first having required the federal government to pass a law enforcing Section 3, that my argument there is invalid if I can't remember the specific name of a person from the Confederacy who tried to hold an office in the Reconstruction era of the United States government who was forbade by Section 3 but not adjudicated in any criminal court first. That's the threshold of evidence that I need to meet to satisfy that argument?
No, Destiny. What I'm saying is if I had done the opposite, if I had said there was no case in the history of America of a state ever doing this sort of thing, and then you said, Ryan, that's a bold historic claim. Do you have some source for that claim? Do you have some kind of historic record, some article that backs that claim up? And then I said, a guy named John Smith told me, and then I was like, John Smith, I don't know that name. You're like, oh, I made that one up. Hold on, let me check AI and see and hope I can find one. I'm pointing that out, Destiny. That you made a claim without actually having the information. That doesn't mean that your argument is invalid. It's very possible that such information exists and we could examine it together. What I'm calling out, Destiny, is that you said this without knowing what you were talking about, whether you're right or wrong.
Gotcha.
No, wait a minute.
So
wait a
I
minute.
linked
There's
I
no
linked
way.
an article
real quick. There's no way Destiny's using AI. Right, that wouldn't happen, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that's not happening because that would.
You understand? I read the whole Bott and Paulson paper on stream. Like I've gone through all of these court cases on stream.
We Justin, we lost the feed. I don't know what you said. I don't know what you said.
I linked a thing in the side. Okay. You can read this if you want. I'm going to paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5
Sorry,
here.
You're going to what? We couldn't hear you. You were.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
What are you looking at?
I'm going to paragraph 5 in the link that I put in the StreamYard. Okay, on the side. It starts with, historical precedent also confirms that a criminal conviction is not required for an individual to be disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. No one who has been formally disqualified under Section 3 was charged under the criminal rebellion or insurrection statute or its predecessors. This fact is consistent with Section 3's text, legislative history, and precedent, all of which make clear that a criminal conviction for any offense is not required for disqualification. Section 3 is not a criminal penalty, but rather is a qualification for holding public office in the United States that can be and has been enforced through civil lawsuits in state courts, among other means.
Okay, and what's do they have historic examples somewhere down here? I think they do at the bottom, right?
It seems they have a table with listing several people, I guess.
Yeah, so let's take a look and see what kind of examples they have, because he makes the statements, but I'm not sure what he's referring to.
Sure. So the name here is Kenneth H. Worthy.
Horry held local office in a. Rob, would it be easier if we pulled this up? So, you have it up. Sorry, I had it inside. Sorry,
this is where you're at, right, Destiny?
Yeah. Sorry, I had it in the side window. I didn't realize you had it up. Held local office in a Confederate state. Worthy was not accused of engaging in others. Public position when disqualified. County sheriff. Mandamus action by Worthy to challenge his disqualification by county commissioner under state law implementing Section 3. So this isn't federal. This is whether he can be a sheriff. I don't think there's a serious question that states can use this provision as to state offices.
Are you
We
sure?
Can I
go-
scroll, Destiny? Can I scroll down
we
and
go
see
to
if
the
there's a
next
federal
example?
example? Is that fair?
This is a state example. Do you understand why that's not what we're talking about?
I mean, they're citing the same.
State judge. Oh, U.S. senator. This might be a good one.
Sure, but also they're citing. To be clear, they're citing the same amendment. That, like,
No,
it's
but Destiny, there's a very big difference between a state saying that you may not run for office within the state as a result of this amendment versus a state saying you may not run for federal office.
gotcha.
As a result of
How
this
would
amendment.
that difference play out in regards to the question of how you would adjudicate the question?
Sorry, I'm trying to see if this federal example makes sense.
Okay.
Because this might be what you're looking for. I just haven't worked through it. New York State
The
governor.
other one
under
worked, but we can
contempt-
look at this if you want as well.
U.S. Senator, Congress. If you don't care, we can stop looking at it. But Congress refused seat, although refused disqualification petition by losing candidate. Kansas resident. Oh, he was imprisoned during the Civil War. He was granted parole. It was kind of like a pardon. It's like a quasi pardon. And it's formally pardoned in 1877. Can we go scroll down? Did not. Okay, they say it was challenged. I don't know how that turned out. So we could look up that court decision if it's of interesting. That seems to be the one that's closest to what you're talking about. But it just says that his position was challenged. It doesn't say how that was resolved.
Well, it says here that Georgia governor refused to commission him and Congress refused to seat him.
Yeah, Congress refused to seat him. Sure.
So he was.
And then it was. Sorry, I can't see anymore. Can we scroll back up? So he was elected by state legislature to his U.S. Senate seat. His appointment was challenged by the losing candidate. Neither were seated. At the time, President Anderson did not apply to U.S. former representatives. Can you scroll down? Sorry. Ultimately reelected in 1878. Oh, this is a different guy. Sorry, this is we're reading the wrong guy.
That's him. That's Vance, who's U.S. representative out of North
sorry.
Carolina. Same guy.
Okay. Andrew Anderson did not apply. Ultimately, he was reelected in 1878 and served a long U.S. Senate tenure. So, I mean, I guess the question I would have is whether it was cured via what is it? Section 3 has the curing provision. I would assume that's how that happened. Okay, so so this is the kind of example you're looking for, Destiny?
Sure.
Okay, so then the question would be, if there is some historic precedent of this happening, and this happening without a Supreme Court decision, what weight to give that evidence would be the way that a court would look at it. And this is a thing that happens a lot in various contexts. For example, in the context of birthright citizenship, there is tons of evidence of non-Supreme Court government actors denying birthright citizenship to temporary sojourners in the United States, even after the 14th Amendment was passed. The question is, how much weight will the court give to that evidence, which is typically not zero.
Sure. So then
but
let's ask,
less than they would
focusing.
give,
Yeah. So
less than they
focusing.
would give to a Supreme
Yeah.
Court
So
ruling. For
focusing specifically on this. Okay. I'm a retarded car cleaner. You're the legal guy. Tell me, what are some things that we might look at to determine what weight to give the actions of these states that were denying people access to federal office based on things that hadn't been adjudicated in a criminal court? What are some things that we might look at to figure out what the amendment means and how everybody was interpreting it?
Yeah, I think that what they would do is what the court did. They would weigh the evidence that there is some historic practice of here, generally speaking, in fairly chaotic times. And I would also say, in this case,
I'm sorry. Wait, real quick in the beginning. Did they do that in their Supreme Court decision? Were they talking about historic examples that supported the decision they made?
No, they went with the patchwork argument because this outweighed it. But
Okay.
and then they would weigh that against the problem of a national officer like the president having his access to the ballot deciding by individual states. And they decided that that was a patchwork nightmare and therefore decided 9-0 against it. Again, it seems like the rule to the contrary would be completely unworkable. Do you disagree with that? Do you think that
No.
it would be viable?
Well, like unworkable or chaotic, that's in my mind, that's not an argument against the Constitution. I'm sorry. Number one, some people would argue, you're having this issue right now, that the Supreme Court is chaotic and unworkable. So we need to pack the court, is arguments that people are making, right? So my question is if we're changing this based on it being chaotic or unworkable, and we can't source this from history, what is even the argument that it would be chaotic and unworkable? Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah. Let's say that Trump was taken off the ballot in Colorado by a civil case finding without even a criminal conviction that he was an insurrectionist.
Okay.
Let's say that then Texas passes a law that is called insurrection and has a very easy to meet standard. And for example, all of the, I'm forgetting their names right now, but I could look them up if it matters, but I don't think it matters particularly. All of the senators who were charging ICE facilities are insurrectionists and therefore are ballot barred. If we say that, Harris or Newsom is an insurrectionist and is therefore ballot barred. And every state starts going down this slippery slope of deciding who gets to be on their ballot through partisan methods. And pretty soon, people think that the presidential election is a joke, which actually is the problem with court packing, because it turns the rule of law into a joke.
Gotcha.
Which
so
is
then my
why
question
I was
is,
criticizing you for calling a 9-0 decision vibes-based.
Gotcha.
Because that
You're
seems to
filibustering
be,
again.
at least in my opinion,
so my question, I just want to stay right here. I don't know why you're
warming
appealing.
up to,
This is non-responsive.
which is that you'd
So
like the law
non-responsive
to be called
filibuster,
vibe-based, because
filibuster.
then your decision to advocate for court
I got all
packing
night.
looks less morally reprehensible.
Gotcha. Okay. So what if we thought that there was going to be a bunch of chaos caused by some small number of states doing some wacky and crazy things? Didn't Section 3 of the 14th Amendment provide us with a mechanism by which to escape that?
Not particularly, no.
There's not, the last sentence doesn't say something along the lines of the Congress can remedy this injury by passing a law that would make it so states can't cite to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to keep somebody off the ballot?
It sure did, Destiny. It sure did. In that vein, I take it by that logic that you think that because the Senate did not convict Trump on his impeachment trial, that he did nothing wrong?
No, that has nothing to do with this question whatsoever.
It does. It turns out it's pretty hard to get a simple majority, let alone a 2/3 majority in the Senate. And if you're relying on the cure provision, which would have to be passed by both houses of Congress by a 2/3 margin in a country that looks anything like ours, that is an unavailable remedy. And since the court was engaging in prudential analysis, that strikes me as a thing that they would think is not actually going to serve any purpose.
Gotcha. So it would be hard.
It would be non-functional. And again,
it would be hard. No, don't say
non.
non-functional. That doesn't make any sense. It would
This
be
would
difficult.
not be an original. This is not an originalist opinion, Destiny. So yes, they're engaging in prudential analysis.
Gotcha. So then are we basically saying that it would be impossible to ever enforce Section 3, since by the logic of this court and you would have to pass a law to enforce it as per Section 5?
That such a law already exists.
To enforce Section 3?
Yeah.
What law?
There is a federal insurrection law. Jack Smith considered whether to charge Trump with the crime of insurrection.
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about here.
Yes, it would have, because if Jack Smith had convicted Trump of insurrection, he would have been ballot ineligible.
Where does that say that in the amendment? That the conviction is what makes that a thing? I don't have the language. I'm sorry, I can't read that. I don't see that anywhere.
No person shall be senator representing Congress or elector and president or vice president or hold any office, blah, 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 who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member, blah, 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 to support the Constitution, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion. So if you are convicted of engaging in insurrection, you are ineligible.
Wait, you keep saying convicted. I'm sorry, where does that say that in there?
It does not say convicted.
Okay. So let's talk. All of that didn't make any sense, and nothing to do. There is nothing in here requiring a conviction, and you would know.
I'm not saying
if you read the
no.
Then why did you just say
goalpost shift?
Excuse me. I'm not. My question initially was. I said, hold on. Wait. No. Let me restate the question. You filibuster so much. You filibuster so much.
A few seconds ago, you said that this would be impossible to enforce,
Correct.
and I said Congress already passed a law which would allow for the enforcement of it, the crime of insurrection. Yes, a crime requires a conviction. That is the nature of a crime.
Nothing in here references
I'm not saying that they
crimes.
had to
Nothing
make it a
in here
criminal law,
references
Destiny.
convictions or crimes.
Listen to me for 2 seconds.
You're getting
before you talk.
frustrated because you
I
just
am
caught
not
out because
saying
you're
it
making
had
stuff
to
up.
be a
You're making
crime.
stuff up.
I'm saying that the law that they passed is a criminal statute, so it could be enforced today had Jack Smith thought that he could get an insurrection conviction on Trump. He didn't think he could, and he wrote a memo explaining why he would not be able to get such a conviction, and then opted not to. But that doesn't mean the law doesn't exist. And what you said is that there's no way to enforce it. There is. It's just not something that was
filibustering.
available in this instance.
What wasn't available? There was no crime of insurrection when this amendment was written?
Jack Smith.
Why are we
made
talking
the
about Jack Smith? We're not talking about any of that. That has
charging
nothing to do with any of
President Trump
this.
with insurrection was a legal non-starter, and he would lose the case.
Yeah, because we
which
don't
is why he
typically
didn't do it.
charge people with that crime. But that has nothing to do with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. There's nothing in here about having been convicted of a crime. You understand that, for instance, when it comes to impeachment, it doesn't require a criminal conviction.
Honestly, this is so.
You're frustrated, Ryan. You're frustrated because you're not using a legal mind right now. You're trying to read this like a layman, and you're getting frustrated that the law doesn't support anything that you're saying. Historically, and you would understand this if you read the Constitution as a harmonious document where the language is consistent from start to finish. We would understand that disbarring people from holding office is not typically something that requires a criminal conviction. That's why impeachment very specifically does not consider criminal conviction when it comes to impeaching somebody from holding office. Much the same that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment also didn't require a criminal charge. You don't think they knew how to write criminal conviction? You don't think they knew the words to have in here to require some sort of crime to be, alleged or charged? No, they knew the language. Of course they did. And they explicitly did not leave it in here because criminal convictions are not usually part of what you would use to disbar from somebody from holding office. I'm giving you the legal argument, and you're giving me the layman argument. I'm waiting for a legal argument from you. I need a legal argument from you, rather than it feels right. Go ahead.
After your wild goalpost shift, and I would love
which goalpost did I shift?
And see exactly
what goalpost did I shift?
You said there was no way to enforce Section 3.
Why?
And then
why did I say that?
Wait. Why
did I say there was no way to enforce Section 3?
You just talked for 10 minutes.
Why did I say there was no way to enforce Section 3?
You just went on a rant.
Why did I say that?
Let me finish.
Okay, I'll have to say it since you can't cite anything I'm saying correctly. I said you can't enforce Section 3 because you're saying it would be too hard to pass it by both halves of the Congress, but Section 5 would also require a law to be passed by both halves of the Congress. So it seems self-defeating.
Is to get a criminal conviction because there is a criminal law on the books. Congress could have, but did not, and has not yet passed a civil version of that. I am not saying a criminal conviction is necessary under the Constitution. You said it was impossible to enforce this. I pointed out that there is a law that allows the enforcement of it today, and that the only reason it wasn't enforced in that way is because they did not have the evidence to support such a conviction. I was responding to your erroneous point.
It's not because you have no way. You see a similar word. You just don't do. You don't do legal analysis.
Destiny, that a criminal conviction is required under the Constitution. I was responding to your statement that there is no way to enforce this today. There is a way to enforce this today. Would you like me to give you the statute?
Nothing in this amendment calls out the necessity for a criminal conviction. You're fabricating that language.
Destiny, I'm going to say this to you for like the 5th time because I'm not sure if you're just not listening or you're just invested in being bad faith about this. I am not saying a criminal conviction is required. You said earlier that there was no way to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and I said there is a way. There is a criminal statute.
Okay, I don't think you understand what I'm saying. The reason why I said there's no way to do it is because the way to do it would be, by your argument, via Section 5. But you're saying that it would be unreasonable to expect that Congress would vote by 2/3 on the upper and lower body to remove such a disability. So I'm asking why you would expect Congress to be able to apply such a disability. It seems because
they already have. The reason I think it's reasonable is because they already have. There is a criminal law that's been passed. It's 8 USC Section 2383, rebellion or insurrection. You should be familiar with it because you debated about this law for like 2 years. So you know the law exists. And obviously, if you were convicted of insurrection, then Section 3 would apply to you.
Wait,
So
why
I
would
think
Section 3...
Congress-
Wait. So you're saying that if I look up 18 USC 2383, it would say Section 3 then applies to you?
No, Destiny. I'm saying. Okay, let me try. Let me try to.
No.
work this out.
Don't
If
use
you-
an
Destiny,
analogy. Stop
you are
running
con-
because you
if
understand that
you
you're
are
saying them. Oh
convicted
my
of
God!
murder-
Why
No.
are you using analogies?
This
You're
is the-
confused on the initial
Destiny, this
argument.
question
An analogy is used to
this
flesh out
question
an
is
argument.
so
I'm just going to talk
easy
because you
that
can't.
I think
right?
even you
There
can
is
get it if you stop filibustering.
there is additional
Destiny,
language in this
if you are
statute.
convicted of murder,
There is
murderer?
there is additional language. That's not a legal word that we're adjudicating the definition
you
of, and it's not
are
found in the
convicted of
Constitution
murder,
that we're
are you a
talking
murderer,
about. You just don't understand the law. You have a layman's
you are-
brain.
if
You have a
you are-
layman's
Destiny,
brain right now.
I'm going to have to give you the piece.
I'm
yes
sorry,
or
but
no
like
if
you
can't
don't
handle this.
You just don't have.
If you are convicted of murder, Destiny, are you a murderer?
As per who? What does that mean when you say murderer?
One who has committed a murder, Destiny. That's what murderer means.
In what
Someone who has
context?
murdered.
In what context?
The context of being convicted by a jury of your peers that you murdered
Do you
someone.
understand jurisdiction? Do you understand like different legal standards? Do you understand the difference between the standard of impeachment versus a criminal
Destiny,
process? Do you have any understanding of any of this at all?
Do you honestly think, are you saying right now you can't answer the question, if someone is convicted of murder, are they a murderer? That's too hard.
I would imagine if somebody was convicted of murder in the jurisdiction that they are convicted in, that they would be considered a murderer in said jurisdiction.
So
yes.
if someone is convicted of insurrection, are they an insurrectionist?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So then the application to Section 3 is pretty obvious. If you are convicted of insurrection, then you have engaged in insurrection.
I agree.
That's what it says.
But you're doing an if A, then B, but you're implying that the only way to get to B is through A. I agree with you. If you get a
No,
conviction,
I'm not implying that.
Oh,
Destiny,
okay.
I said
Then,
this
wait,
to
then we
you
agree.
5
Then we agree. That's fine. Then, if you're convicted
Okay,
as an insurrectionist, but wait, you agree? There's nothing in this amendment that says you must be convicted as an insurrectionist.
No.
There's nothing in here.
If Congress, in their wisdom, had passed a law where you could be declared an insurrectionist through the civil process rather than the criminal process, I agree that that would qualify. They have not done so. The law that they passed is criminal only.
Which law? Not the constitutional amendment, but the federal statute, right?
Yeah, 18 U.S.C. 2383.
Okay. Why does that federal statute at the end say, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States?
Because they're making it super duper clear, Destiny, that if you are convicted under this, that you are not going to be able to hold office under the United States.
But that's not what the penalty in Section 3 requires, right? The penalty in Section 3 is only applied if you were a prior oath taker and then engaged in insurrection. So it seems like this federal law here goes a little bit further and is not necessarily... Why would you even add in the last thing here if it's like just assumed to be true under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment?
Because Congress decided that they wanted to pass a law that went beyond the bare requirements of the 14th Amendment, which they are entitled to do. In many cases, Destiny, we have laws that go beyond the bare requirements of the Constitution. That's not particularly weird. The Constitution dictates whether the legislature has the power to do something. And if they have the power, there are many cases where they pass laws that are more specific than what is listed in the Constitution. Of course, almost all of our laws work like that.
I agree with you. Alito doesn't, but that's a separate argument. But then nothing in Section 3, again, I don't even know why we're on this tangent of if you're convicted of this crime, you can't hold a federal office.
Because you said that they hadn't passed a law, and they had. That's why we're on it, Destiny. You said something that was wrong. I corrected you, and you filibustered for 20 minutes, and now you're like, why on earth are we on this filibuster point that I've been on for 20 minutes? It's because you were wrong, and I corrected you, and it just took you a long time to realize you were wrong.
No.
If you'd like to talk about something else, I'm happy to move on. I don't think there's a disagreement here.
When I said that they hadn't passed a law before there was an Amnesty Act, what I was saying was that the Congress passed amnesty acts for people affected by Section 3 without Congress having passed a Section 5 law to enforce it yet.
Okay.
Unless you're going to claim that the amnesty acts that were passed in the 1800s also seem to revoke the office-holding section of this law indefinitely.
Well, because I try not to make historic claims without actually having the information on hand, I would be delighted to look up, if it would be helpful, what those convictions were under. The one example that we had was a state who then disqualified their own senator, At that time, senators were elected by the state legislature. So it strikes me that that is more of a state issue than a presidential election would be. But if
Why?
you want to look
Wait,
up
why would you
other
say that?
examples-
Why would that matter more?
Because at that time, this was before the 17th Amendment, if I recall. Yeah, it definitely is. The state legislatures directly appointed their senators. So the nexus between a senator and a state process, as opposed to a federal process, was a lot tighter than it is today.
Okay, I don't understand why that would magically make this amendment apply or not apply or not apply. You're just making up a whole bunch of extra stuff. The actual answer is it probably would have been really inconvenient to enforce Section 3. We would hope that Congress would pass a remedy to help with the confusion here. And if they don't, then we have an interesting conundrum that we're in where we probably need either a new constitutional amendment or at least a new robust federal law to prevent the confusion. But I think that the idea of running to the Supreme Court and asking them to invent their own interpretation that can't be found anywhere in the text, anywhere in the history, anywhere in the legislative intent of this, for them to invent something, that just seems wholly improper to me, in my opinion.
So you think that Justice Jackson, Justice Kagan, Justice Sotomayor did something wholly improper?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And is that why it would be worth it to pack the court to make sure that those naughty justices never do something this improper again?
I don't think I'm not sure how I'm even in for court packing. But also just as a clear thing, you kept screaming 9-0, 9-0, 9-0. Like, just to be clear, there were multiple concurrences written here that take issue with the per curiam decision, right? There were multiple things here that were...
Justin, we've already talked about this. Now we're just recycling things.
I'm understanding. I'm just saying that you're screeching 9-0 to pretend like this is a wholly unified court.
With a different aspect of the decision, which is not what we're discussing here.
That's fine. I'm just saying that you're screeching about this being 9-0, 9-0, 9-0, when this could have just as easily been a 5-4 decision or 6-3 decision, depending on how Amy cut.
It could not have just as easily been a 5-4 decision because the justices cared deeply about the patchwork issue, which you called vibes.
Yes, this is a vibes argument.
So which is why I criticized you.
That's a vibes argument. It is though, because you can't find this argument in law. Where in the Constitution does it say all amendments need to be very convenient and they have to avoid patchwork situations?
Across the country, people are around the left, and this is not streamers, this is mainstream
lots of vibes here now,
are making the argument that we ought pack the U.S. Supreme Court because it's a corrupt and horrible institution. And I'm pointing out that when it was a 9-0 decision, when the justices that are supposed to be ideologically with you agreed, that's still not good enough for you, indicating that the only thing you care about is getting the results you want. You're mad that you didn't get the results you wanted. And that's why when people hear about court packing, they should treat it with derision and scorn.
You're projecting so much. You want to go so far to the court packing argument.
As if it was an outcome-based thing.
You want to go so far. You're going so far. No one is arguing this.
What you said was gross. And
no one is arguing this. This is so far beyond anything that's being said here.
You argue this. Are you claiming that you have never advocated for court packing in the last, I'll not say never. In the last 2 months, you have not advocated for court packing?
I might have, but I feel like I based that more on the vibes. I don't remember 100%. My opinions on the Supreme Court are super mixed right now.
Well, I invite Destiny's fans and my fans to investigate that claim and see whether or not there are plentiful clips of Destiny advocating for court packing. I will not claim to have them on hand because I do not.
That's fine. I mean, I don't care. I mean, I'll defend them now. It's not. This isn't like
go find them.
That's fine. I don't understand what the point is of if you're trying to get me on. I'm sure I probably made the argument that fuck it, we should just fucking pack the court because they should just fucked anyway. I probably made that argument.
Here's the point.
So then yes, you did. Okay, that's easy. Yes, you did.
Real quick, this is some of the things that I think's going on, Destiny. Like when you're like, the fact it was a 9-0, I think they're wrong, and you bring up these slight objections that you've read from one attorney or something, you're citing things even here that's not taking into account the actual decision. For example, you cited that the amendment occurred before they actually passed the law that Ryan was talking about. However, they were enforcing via the law, labeling people insurrectionists and making it illegal from office even before the law that Ryan's talking about. Here is from the decision. Congress has long given effect to Section 3 with respect to would-be or existing federal office holders. Shortly after the ratification of the amendment, Congress enacted the Enforcement Act of 1870. This predates this sort of amnesty that was given. That act authorized federal district attorneys to bring civil actions in federal court to remove anyone holding non-legislative office, federal or state, in violation of Section 3. There you go. They did have a civil law, so they could have went through a civil mechanism. In the years following ratification, the House and Senate exercised their unique powers under Article 1 to adjudicate challenges, contending to certain prospective or sitting members that could not take or retake their seats due to Section 3. And the Confiscation Act of 1862, which predated Section 3, effectively provided an additional procedure for enforcing disqualification. And so, like, when you say, like, well, you know, that when the amnesty passed, the law that Ryan's citing technically hadn't taken effect, we can see that they immediately were doing, in 1862, they already had laws set forth, both civil and criminal, in the federal courts labeling people insurrectionists in a federal method. This decision also says the cases you're bringing up, like that Vance guy, etc., unfortunately for you, no one arguing for Colorado's side brought any of those cases up to any of these justices. So the idea that because you read one guy that's like, there was this one or two people that we think were kept off the courts, that were kept off federal seats because of this, this proves that all 9 of these justices are incorrect. Clearly is not the case.
Gotcha. So if you want to go back to citing things from 1862, why not respond? I just a quick thing.
I'm not making the argument. It's a tiny point. I think the Enforcement Act was repealed in like 1894. I was trying to figure that out while you were talking, Rob, but it's not on the books in that form today, which is why it's not available.
Sure. And also, if you want to go back to some of the language of these laws that were passed before the 14th Amendment, these were the arguments for why the 14th Amendment didn't require a criminal conviction, because there were acts and there were statutes that were passed prior to the 14th Amendment being added to the Constitution that did include language about necessitating some kind of criminal conviction in order to say that somebody can't hold a office again. But historically, in the United States, we really try not to tie criminal convictions to whether or not you can hold office. That's why the impeachment process is not a criminal process, because they don't like the idea that to get rid of somebody, you either have to execute them or assassinate them, or you've got to fabricate criminal charges against them. So generally, these processes are strictly political, so they'd be adjudicated by whatever mechanism the state decides appropriate. That's how it probably should be read originally.
Yeah, and I don't think that's even like, I'm not even sure I'm not even sure that I need to disagree with any of that, because ultimately what the decision was purely that as to federal offices, Section 3 is not self-executing such that states can take advantage of it, because the power is given to Congress, and they did not go so far as to state offices. States remain, at least under this decision, to have that power. So, I mean, I think that's not I think it's a pretty clear outcome in that sense. And it is, by the way, like, it's not like there's no text here. That is what Section 5 says, that Congress shall have the power to enforce. They clarified that Section 3, as relates to federal offices, requires federal legislation. Rob gave you examples historically of such federal legislation. The current federal legislation is the one that I gave you.
Sure. But then square this with what you just said, that yes, Congress can pass legislation that goes further than the amendment, but that doesn't disqualify the amendment or say that the amendment is not in effect until Congress has passed legislation that might go further than the text of the amendment itself.
No, but that's what Section 5 says. It says Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article.
Sure, and they can go further than the amendment.
Yes,
possible, right?
Congress can.
Correct.
But that
doesn't mean that the text itself is dead, that it is not self-executing, that it's not a part of the federal law.
What was the question before the court?
For this particular case, I think it was whether or not Colorado could enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment as per removing a federal candidate from the ballot.
Exactly. So it says that Congress shall have the power, and I agree that Congress can go further than the mere text of the Constitution in using that power. But the question before the court was whether the state had the power, not Congress.
Yeah, but who else would even have that power? Congress doesn't have ballots. It's not a federal election. Congress doesn't have their internal. These are elections that are all ran by the states. The states manage and maintain their ballots. There are aren't there literally different rules? Like sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last presidential election, didn't you have some states that still had like Kanye West on the ballot or like RFK Jr. on the ballot because he missed some threshold to get himself removed and so he was still there on election day? Am I making that up?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I'm honestly confused by this line of questioning. We have oceans of federal election law on the books, like limitations on how much you can give to a candidate, requirements on when election day is. There's a case before the Supreme Court right now about whether you can count ballots after election day. There's oceans of federal law on how
but
federal
what I'm
elections
talking
are
about,
supposed to be run.
I'm talking.
So
None of that was.
I'm not even sure what your.
I'm saying as per allowing people on the ballot. It seems like we already kind of do have a patchwork of laws for how that works. There's not a there's not some federal standard by which every single state allows people onto the ballot in the same measure or manner. You don't go to the federal government to petition them to be allowed on a state ballot unless you feel like they're violating some federal rule. Like it already is a patchwork.
I don't think it's as much of a patchwork as you seem to think it is, but even if there are aspects of it that vary from state to state, and I believe there probably are aspects that vary from state to state as to minor things like how many signatures you need to get on the ballot, that sort of thing. I think there's some variation. There's not variation about whether you need to be 35. There's not variation about constitutional requirements.
Well, but
right?
we're not talking about verification. We're not talking about
where
variation on the requirements. We're talking about how do you adjudicate it as such. That's the question, right? The adjudication for age and citizenship seems to be fairly easy. So the states do that in whatever manner they see fit. Now, the adjudication on the insurrection question, that might be a little bit more difficult, but that doesn't mean that it automatically is taken from the states to be able to make that decision.
Well, there are two arguments that I've given, and just to make sure they're both there. There's the prudential argument that this would create an unworkable patchwork, which is the one that all 9 justices thought was pretty compelling. There is the textual argument that says that they read Section 5 as requiring that Congress pass such laws as to federal officers in order to enforce Section 3. So those are the two arguments. There's the prudential argument and the textual argument. And the court did say that as to Section 3, we do need uniformity. This is not a thing that is left open to the states, and that the 14th Amendment is not self-executing for the states to take advantage of in this way. And in fact,
but then my
states
question
cannot
is,
do so.
There were already different presidential nominees on the ballots in different states. RFK Jr. was not on the ballot in every state in 2024. He was on for like half of them.
I mean, the thing is, though, there are differences, but there's also like an enormous amount of federal law on the requirements for federal elections. I was trying to find the example, but it's a bit of a nightmare to read through. It looks like it's ECFR Part 200 Uniform Administration Requirements, but that might be the wrong one. Hold on, let me see if I can find the right one. But in any case, there's tremendous amount of law on how to run a federal election. I know, for example, you can only donate. I believe off the top of my head, the number is $3,500 to a candidate directly, and all the
5,000. You're talking about FEC campaign contribution limits, but this isn't about who goes on a ballot. This is a fundamentally completely different question. I don't understand how a state doesn't have the right to determine if you go on the ballot or not. Now, in this particular instance, the Supreme Court said no without any good justification. The patchwork argument doesn't work because RFK Jr. and I think Kanye West were on some ballots, and the text argument doesn't work because there's no historical foundation and there's no textual foundation for the argument. It's a vibes argument. They wanted the country to be unified, and it was vibes.
The requirement, Destiny, is that as to the things that the Constitution says, there ought be uniformity. As to the powers which are left to the states, then there can be state variation.
Wait, where is there a lack of uniformity? You said as to what the Constitution says, there's a lack of uniformity.
35 years old is a great example.
Why do you filibuster so much? Just on the first point, you did, because you're saying a bunch of stuff.
You're confused about a very basic concept.
I'm asking you a basic question, but you're scared of just explaining the first thing you said.
The point.
What is the uniformity part that's broken?
The way you argue is that you ask a question, and then when you start getting an answer, you immediately get upset. And
I'm not upset at all. I'm challenging you on the first part of the question, and you're about to rattle off.
Which is why
on 3 other parts and then give an example.
20 minutes on you just being wrong about what federal law is, which I could have resolved that for you in 3 seconds if you would just let me talk.
What was I incorrect about on federal law in this conversation?
You said that Congress did not pass any law which would have enabled disqualification under Article 14, Section 3.
I said before the amnesty was passed. Before the amnesty was passed. The amnesty bill of fucking 1876 or whatever the fuck, or 1872. That Congress hadn't passed. There was no laws that were passed to enforce Section 3 before these. That's what I said.
Yeah. So
Okay,
As
so
to
you're
the
incorrect on that. But
question
that's
that
okay.
we're currently
Wait. So
as to
on the
the
current thing,
question
you
that
just
we're
said you
currently
just mentioned
talking
something
about.
about unity or whatever. What unity is broken in the Constitution by having the language be read for Section 3 the same way that it's read for every other qualification for president? Age 35, no president shall be elected more than 2 terms, have to be a citizen. All of these things are left up to the states to determine for their ballots. This now is the thing that is in disharmony. This thing is brought out of step with the rest of the Constitution.
You are incorrect. If a state said, we are going to determine who is 35 in a completely unique way, we are going to go, we say you have to be 35, but we count by 2s. So everyone has to actually be 70. They would be challenged. They would go to the Supreme Court. They would lose. Now, if a state says, we think you need 5,000 signatures, and the other state says, we think you need 4,000 signatures, that's probably not a constitutional issue because it's not written anywhere in the Constitution. The Constitution requires uniformity on the issues about elections where the Constitution speaks. It does not require uniformity on the issues where it does not.
I agree, but you would go back to the writing of the amendment or the writing of the qualification in the Constitution to see what they meant by 35 years of age, and you would probably have some consensus, a pretty
do you
easy
really
consensus.
think you have to?
What?
For this, it would be. You have to go back and do some textual originalist analysis to figure out what 35 years old means.
So for this, it would be very obvious. For the insurrection one,
Would be pretty obvious.
For the insurrection one, it's not really as obvious, and because it's inconvenient, we decide to get rid of it instead of maybe considering that maybe when that amendment was written, maybe they wanted it to be kind of a thing that it was a big deal when you consider, committing an insurrection against the United States or aiding the enemies of doing it, especially considering how narrow the punishment is. Maybe that was a big deal. And maybe they wanted it so that if it was really bad, Congress could, with 2/3 of the upper and lower chambers, remedy this by passing a law giving amnesty. They've got a mechanism in there, but you don't like it because it's inconvenient, because you want to win on your side.
No, now we're going full circle. I have not independently researched this and come up with like a tight originalist argument because I didn't have to. It was a 9-0 decision. But if this was a 5-4 by the originalists, that's the opinion they would have written. They would have written an originalist opinion. They didn't because they would never get the 3 justices to sign off on an originalist opinion, which is the thing I was trying to explain to you in the first 2 minutes of this conversation.
I agree.
That's why it's not written that way, Destiny.
I agree.
Now,
it was
I would
vibes.
prefer
I
to be
agree.
written that way, but
I agree.
they had good reasons not to.
Yes, vibes reasons. I agree.
No,
yes.
they gave you a prudential reason and a textualist reason. They didn't give you an originalist reason because it's not an originalist opinion. They gave you a textual reason.
You don't need to give. You don't need to do any of this. A 9-0 and a 5-4 decision carry the same weight legally. Maybe one might be more up for challenge in the future, but both of them carry the same weight legally. It survives why you want a 9-0 over a 5-4.
That's true, but I think that the point is that you're trying to set a precedent that these sort of cases don't keep propping up because how damaging it would be. Furthermore, a couple things you just said there, the differentiation between laws about the age of 35 but ballot access, while it is true, there is a reasonable amount of sort of allowing states to choose who gets on the ballot. There's also been Supreme Court decisions that ruled that there can't be unduly burdensome metrics on that. So, for example, there's been courts that said too high of filing fees intended to keep third parties off, or filing deadlines intended to keep third parties off. Federally, the Supreme Court ruled you can't do that. The implication thereof is then any of the 2 major parties you wouldn't be able to keep off. That would be unduly burdensome. Furthermore, if your theory is correct, that would mean one of 2 things. You wouldn't complain if a red state right now kept every single Democrat, including at the state level, off a ballot because they just felt like it. And secondly, why didn't any of the justices bring up this argument you're making? The federal court, we have no say whatsoever and who gets on the ballot, and therefore no one made that argument. Why?
That we have no. Well, Amy said it pretty concisely in her writing that they wanted to unify the country with this writing, and that they didn't want to turn the temperature up. They wanted to turn the temperature down. So I think they avoided the more pressing arguments that would have supported a contrary opinion because they wanted to unify all of us.
Yeah, and Destiny, is originalism contentious between the left and the right today?
99% of Americans don't even know what that means.
Okay, but you do. Do you do? Is that a contentious
I don't think these decisions
issue?
are written for me because these decisions make me matter when I
Destiny,
see concurrences that are written for per curiam opinions that say that the court went too far. That doesn't make me feel any better.
This is the most obvious question in the entire world. You don't think it's obvious whether originalism is contentious between the left and the right? It's the most contentious legal issue between the left and the right.
Why is it so contentious, though?
Because it is a difference in judicial philosophy.
No.
The right tends to ascribe to an originalist philosophy.
No.
The left tends to ascribe to a living constitutionalist philosophy.
Try again.
This is the
try
core
again.
difference.
Try again. Try again. Try. I want you to summon the good faith from your brain and try to think, why do we think that people don't like when people say they're originalists or textualists? Why do you think Supreme Court justices don't like when other justices say that?
Because they think the law is all vibes, Destiny, and they want the outcome they want. That's why they get pissed off about it.
You can't fathom the other side. You don't even know the other argument. You really don't, and you feel this so strongly you could lecture me on this?
Destiny, the point, and again, you're very good at moving away from
I'm not moving away. I'm going to say this again. I'm going to refocus on the exact same question you asked me about why people feel the ways that you said. Was there a huge issue for originalism between the left and right people? And then I asked you, why do you think people have issues with originalism?
Ryan, be quiet. Leave Destiny make his point, and then you can respond.
I'm just asking very simply, what is the strongest faith argument? Why do people have such an issue with originalist interpretations? You can't give it.
They don't like the outcome. That's the reason.
Okay. All right. And people don't like the living constitution ones because they're committed to good faith jurisprudence and interpretation of the Constitution. They feel strongly about what the Constitution means. So those people have very strong reasons why they feel the way they do. But the opposition, they just feel that way because they don't like the outcomes. Really?
Well, one of the differences between originalism and living constitutionalism is originalism could require you to reach a decision you didn't like.
Oh, like in this case with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment
and the constitutionalism can do that. Yeah. But I want to go back to the point before we obfuscate it. You were deriding them trying to speak, but you did say they were speaking in order to unify the country.
Yep.
And the point, which was, I think, an intuitive and simple one I was making, is that if they had rested this decision on originalist logic, that would not have served their purpose of unifying the country. So, of course, they did not write an originalist opinion because that would be contentious, and they were trying to avoid being contentious.
Yeah, I agree with you. Vibes.
Okay. That's the entire point I was trying to make.
Cool. That's the point that I made right at the very beginning, that a lot of it is very vibe-based. You agree with me. I'm glad we finally reached an agreement. I'm curious, Rob Noor, can you give a good faith summary for why you think people might have an issue with originalists or textualists? I can give both sides for the living document for why people think that. So I'm curious, can either of you give the argument on the other side?
I will give this argument, and then I'll respond to something you said earlier. I think that Ryan's largely right, that people get upset about the outcomes. But in general, a theoretical opposition to originalism would be because the country has massively changed in ways that perhaps the people that originally wrote these couldn't have envisioned, that it has to be more of a living contextualism. And so just an originalist point of view would mean that you're stagnated in a framework that would have never been intended. For example, I might take umbrage with an originalist point of view that might allow birthright citizenship, because I might say the founding fathers never intended, or the people that wrote that never intended, that we would have people coming over on boats by the thousand that are foreign diplomats to plot babies out here so that they could be Chinese citizens and American citizens and vote when they turn 18. An originalist may say, sorry, the original reading of this means that we have to accept this. A living contextualist might say, wow, that is so bad, we need to look beyond the original intent and see, or the original wording, and see what the intent may have been.
Sure.
Is that sufficient to what?
I disagree, but you know what? I appreciate that. That is an argument that some people give. I think the main argument against originalism that I see is the idea that when people are claiming to be originalists, they seem to be cherry picking from the record to make their quote unquote originalist argument. When I see pushback against it, so like in this recent Alito decision, that was the main pushback, is that you claim to be an originalist, but it seems like you're cherry picking which historical facts are relevant to you in order to make the argument for what the law originally meant.
Well, that might be, but that would be not criticizing originalism. That would be criticizing claiming to be originalist.
Sure.
Now, the question I have for you,
people are hypocrites or something.
The question I have for you, if you're right, that the Supreme Court justices, at least some of them, knew that they have no say whatsoever in how states decide who's on the ballot. But for this one issue, because they wanted to have a kumbaya moment, that they ignored that and just pretended to bring the country together. I could list Williams v. Rhodes in 68, Bullock v. Carter, 72, Sterner v. Brown, 74, Anderson v. Breeze in 83. What was the last one I hear? Buckley versus American Constitutional Law Foundation. All of these were Supreme Court decisions that were weighing in on who was allowed on ballots in state elections. Were they also having kumbaya moments in every one of those decisions? Or could it be that the Supreme Court actually feels that they too are allowed to weigh in on who is allowed or not allowed on the ballot?
I don't know anything about any of those underlying decisions, so I would have to read them to figure out what they were even about.
I would say that would you at least be able to concede that there were probably cases in the past about who's allowed on a ballot that went to the federal Supreme Court?
There might have been. I mean, I'll concede that there might be prior like schools of thought that were more common in the Supreme Court that I would just think are horrible now. I'm pretty sure modern day Supreme Court people, I feel like I watched, I think it was Breyer give a speech on this, where the Supreme Court was like the fucking Wild West of decision writing, that you would get these huge decisions that would be like fucking... like, I think Brown v. Board was like fucking 14 pages or whatever. You get these huge decisions, but it's like a few pages long, like barely writing on shit. And they're just like machine gunning stuff out there. And the scholarship is not very great. And the citation to other law is not very great. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem saying that. Yeah.
I mean, but again, this seems to be contradictory with what your original argument was here. Your original argument was, my understanding is the court rarely decides things based on this sort of patchwork interpretation that says that it would be bad for a patchwork amount of states. Now you're saying, well, even if we have a history of decades of the Supreme Court weighing in on who can and can't be on a ballot when it comes to state elections, sometimes they're fucking crazy. Who cares what they've done in the past?
I wouldn't care if members of the court said, I'm partisan and this is how I fucking rule. I'd be like, okay, fuck it, fine. At least we're in the same ballpark. But when they're trying to put forth these arguments that I feel like they're incredibly inconsistent on, right? So when it comes to the Section 3 case, a patchwork is incredibly important to avoid so that we can get buy-in for a big 9-0 decision. But when it comes to Dobbs and when it comes to kicking, out Casey and Roe v. Wade, well, we have a patchwork of abortion laws right now that are utter chaos, that we're begging the courts now, like, can we have abortion drugs that are mailed from one state to another, and can a state extradite some abortion doctor in one state, or do we need to have bounty systems set up? But that patchwork seems A-okay. Or now we've got VPNs.
But those are fundamentally, that's
why?
fundamentally different. Let me explain why. What this is deciding is, if certain states are allowed to keep up people like presidential candidates off, that are obviously should be on, like the leader of one of the two major parties, that has an effect on each and every state because it would help determine on
That's
who
fine.
eventually becomes
Texas
the
made
president.
that same argument in Texas v. I understand what you're saying,
is-
but Texas made the same argument in Texas v. Pennsylvania, saying they didn't like the way that they ran their election. So we as a state should have a deciding factor over how they do their elections in their state. And the Supreme Court said, no, fuck you. You don't get to decide what another state does with their elections.
It's clearly different. It's a difference between the nuances of how we allow count-in ballots, like mail-in ballots, etc., versus intentionally keeping a major party candidate on. The points you bring about Roe v. Wade and how the laws have become patchwork sense, that's because we're taking away a right that we said that wasn't in the Constitution, in this case, a right to abortion, which then allows each state to make that decision, which is ironically a more democratic decision. Right, so we've taken away a right that we say the Constitution never afforded. This is different when we're coming to questions of how to proffer elections and who allowed beyond them. The truth is, Destiny, like...
I disagree with your rationale. Like, I think that this, we could do this, like, real quickly. For Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, I'm curious, why are you okay with Alito having decided that in that case, where a law was written to enforce a prior constitutional amendment, that he said that law went too far, even though there was 37 years of supposed agreement between the courts and the legislators?
It's because of the Rucho decision in 2019. So what happened is, at the time the law was passed, partisan gerrymandering was not legal. It became legal in 2019. So the way the law is phrased, it says that
partisan gerrymandering in the states was illegal prior to.
No, it was not declared legal. States
I don't know what not declared legal means. Was partisan gerrymandering legal or illegal prior to 2019, prior to Rucho?
It was unclear. So states spent a lot of time attempting to avoid the appearance of, like, prior to what the case in 2019 decided is that you could be overt. You could say at the state level, we are gerrymandering to keep our guy in office. That's perfectly legal. It's a valid state interest. That was not something that the Supreme Court had ever articulated prior to 2019. So as relates to the VRA, that changes the analysis because the VRA says that a minority group cannot have a lesser opportunity. But everybody now is getting partisan gerrymandered. So if you are getting gerrymandered on the basis of your political affiliation, that's not a lesser opportunity. That's the exact same opportunity everybody else gets. So post that decision, the interpretation of the VRA changed.
Isn't all gerrymandering done on partisan consideration?
Well, that's why they ultimately ruled the way that they did.
No. Hold on, wait. Answer that question. Isn't all are you telling me that in the past? Are you telling me in the past that there were black districts that the conservatives said, I really don't like the fact that these guys are voting as a block, even though they vote for us. Let's go ahead and gerrymander these, even though we're going to lose seats because we're so racist. Isn't all gerrymandering partisan?
In the prior to 2019, when states gerrymandered, they had to pretend they were doing it for some other reason.
But it was partisan, right?
They of course were doing it for partisan reasons.
Sure.
But they'd be like, oh, actually, this city looks like a bat, and this city looks like a rectangle, and that's what the map just makes more sense this way.
Is there any gerrymander that was ever thrown out for partisan reasons in the federal?
They had to pretend. I don't know.
There wasn't, right? Otherwise, why would so many state Supreme Courts have it written into their constitution that partisan gerrymandering is legal?
But what changed, Destiny, was that in 2019, the U.S.
nothing
Supreme
changed
Court
with
said that there was no constitutional basis for a federal court to say that partisan gerrymandering was an illicit interest. Now
that's
when
not how that works.
It's
not that a thing is considered illegal until the Supreme Court says that.
It does make a difference, Destiny, because the way that the VRA is written, it says that a minority group cannot have a lesser opportunity than the majority group. But the majority groups are getting overtly partisan gerrymandered. So if a minority group is overtly partisan gerrymandered, they are being treated equally. They're not being treated worse. They're being like, I live in a state where I am gerrymandered the fuck out of things. I will never have my vote.
Every single gerrymander is done for partisan reasons. Are there states that are there whose parties are doing gerrymanders that are losing the majority party seats? Has this ever happened?
Destiny, the change in law.
There was not a change in law. Why do you keep citing a Supreme Court decision as a change in law? That's not what the Supreme Court does. They don't write law. Isn't that a breathing constitutional interpretation? Are you telling me the Supreme Court writes law now?
Destiny, I am telling you that the Supreme Court's decision in 2019
you have no response. This is boring. Okay. You don't have. It didn't clarify. No. It was never illegal. You're just fabricating that because Alito said it. You're making this up though. There was nothing in the. There was nothing.
Holy shit! It's very difficult.
It's difficult because you don't have a legal foundation for anything you're saying. You're giving layman arguments. I don't know why you do. Rob could do these arguments better than you. Like these are layman arguments. Why would state constitutions bake into their state constitution saying
Destiny,
that you are not allowed to partisan gerrymandering if it was understood to be federally illegal? It doesn't make any sense.
Destiny, here is the ruling of the Rucco case in 2019. Held, partisan gerrymandering claims present political questions beyond the reach of federal courts. The federal courts will not say that a partisan gerrymander is unconstitutional. They ruled it in 2019.
Was that opinion? Hold on, wait. Was that opinion?
Prior to that ruling, it was not clear because there had not been a clear ruling on whether or not the Supreme Court would take that position. The ruling was yes. So there is a change in the law based on Rucco, and the VRA case is re-examining the VRA in light of Rucco. That's why they came to a different outcome.
What does held mean here?
Destiny, if I can, real quick. I'm in no better position than you.
Well, wait, hold on. This was how it was viewed for the past 40 years in gerrymandering. Nobody had this understanding that, so people thought that it was going to be illegal to partisanly gerrymander?
Yes. I, if I may, real quick, I'm in the same position as you. I'm not claiming I knew this. I'm looking it up as you're speaking. But listen, in November 2016, a federal panel, that's what's discussing when they say the panel declared that the state house plan adopted by Wisconsin Republican-controlled legislator in 2011 was unconstitutional partisan gerrymander that violated the Equal Protection Clause and the plaintiff's First Amendment freedom of association. The ruling was the first time in over 3 decades that a federal court invalidated a redistricting partisan bias. Then you can see on January 23rd, 2019, the court granted in part the state assembly's motion to stay the case, postponing the trial until the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on partisan gerrymandering appeals from North Carolina and Maryland as well on June 27, 2019. Supreme Court's opinion in those cases held that partisan gerrymandering claims are non-justicable. So yes, there were a rash leading into this of gerrymandering cases that federal courts were ruling were illegal.
Why did
the 2019
they strike down,
case said we can't weigh in.
Why did they strike down that the first case that was brought up?
Because they thought that partisan gerrymandering was unconstitutional.
Give me the case. Fuck it, we'll read it.
You want to read the summary or do you want to read the actual case? Give me the
name of the case. The name of that one that Rob just cited, that first one where they fought the map or whatever.
I think this is a summary of the same case I was talking about, which is this is Gilvery Whitford, so it's a different case. Okay. By the way, the reason Rob found it is that Gil v. Whitford is cited in RUCO.
Good cover.
So if it's helpful, in RUCO, when they describe the case that you're looking at, they wrote, this court's partisan gerrymandering cases have left unresolved the question whether such claims of partisan gerrymandering are legal right, resolvable according to legal principles, or political questions that must find their resolution elsewhere. And then the Supreme Court clarified that partisan gerrymandering is a political question that federal courts will not rule on, which is why it was such a big change in the law.
Wait, what part of the law changed?
Prior to RUCO, most states, when they gerrymandered, would create pretextual reasons. They would say, we're gerrymandering to make the districts look better. We're gerrymandering to do X, Y, and Z. What they wouldn't say is we're gerrymandering to keep our guy in the House. In RUCO, the court clarified that even if you say we are gerrymandering to keep your guy in the House, that is a non-justiciable question. Federal courts have no say over it. That's why we have the present gerrymandering wars today, and we didn't have them in 2010s, because in 2010s, states were afraid to be as overt with their gerrymandering as they are today, because it might have been unconstitutional, and there was a risk, as in Gil v. Whitford, which Rob showed you, that your map would be struck down as unconstitutional. So that
what
was
I'm
the
trying to
change
understand
in
is
law.
why would we ever assume that the Supreme Court or the federal government could rule on partisan gerrymanders?
I actually think I agree with you. I think it was clear that they couldn't, but it had been unresolved. So lower courts were deciding the question on their own. And the example that Rob
Would you say
gave
that
you,
if
Gil
somebody
v.
was brought
Whitford,
back
is
as
an
a
example
zombie,
of
if
a
somebody's
lower-
brought back from the
Let me
dead,
finish-
if somebody was brought back from the
let me
dead, I
finish
know
my-
because you always ramble on some. If somebody's brought back from the dead
if
and
you
they're
actually
undead
listened
zombie,
to what I was
and they're
saying,
undead
you
zombie,
would know
do you
the
think that
answer
it's?
to
Would
these
you say that it's
questions.
unresolved right now as to how we like treat this person? Like, would they follow no laws? Like, you use this like very weird language to make this claim that like anything could happen because there's an unresolved question. Like there's a trillion things that we could imagine are unresolved before the court because the court hasn't like specifically been asked this particular question.
Yes,
but
Real quick, Ryan,
I can
before you speak,
explain
real quick,
this, but it's
it
going to
says
risk
the
me talking.
reasons. Real quick, it says the reasons that they allowed the federal court to do this was that it violated the Equal Protection Clause and the plaintiff's First Amendment freedom of association. Now, I don't agree with that. Ryan doesn't agree with it, and Destiny, it sounds like you don't agree with it. But that's the rationale they gave for the federal courts weighing it.
Yes. And Destiny, when I'm saying it's unresolved, that means that we have multiple circuits, multiple circuit courts, multiple district courts. If the Supreme Court has not ruled on the issue, then you're going to have some district courts ruling one way, some district courts ruling another way, some circuit courts ruling one way, some circuit courts ruling another way, without a clear resolution of what the law is.
So you're telling me, just so I understand what you're saying,
The Supreme Court resolved the point.
Just so I understand what you're saying, you're telling me that prior to 2019, there were multiple courts on the federal level. There were circuits, there were district courts that were saying you can't partisan gerrymander?
At least one, that's the Gil v. Whitford case.
You said district courts and circuit courts, and in this one, it sounds like they got shot down
I was
immediately,
explaining
right?
to what unresolved means. Unresolved means that courts are free
you got so much.
to interpret differently.
I understand what unresolved means, but
Well,
my
then why are you
understanding is
asking
that
the question if you understand?
because this is not a question where all the courts were ruling in a hodgepodge of different ways. I don't think that's true. I think it was generally understood that although it was a not fine part of our democracy, that gerrymandering politically was a thing that was acceptable federally. That was not a justiciable question.
But Rob just showed you a case where they ruled the opposite way.
No,
Here's another.
No, hold on. They didn't rule the opposite way. They ruled in accordance to what my understanding would be and what I think the entire country's understanding would be about partisan gerrymandering.
What do you think that is?
That it was allowed.
No, because that's what happened in the case Rod showed you, Gil v. Whitford. The court struck not the Supreme Court, the lower court struck a gerrymandered map as being unconstitutional as a partisan gerrymander because the issue was unresolved. So the lower courts were free to come up with their own constitutional interpretation. When the Supreme Court resolved the constitutional issue, the lower courts are no longer free.
You say they were free to do it. They weren't free to do it. They made their ruling, and then the Supreme Court said, no, that ruling's wrong.
Again, but you're going back and forth. Again, what we're saying here is, in fact, one of these was the test case that was used in the decision for the Supreme Court. We had a rash of at least 3 maps that federal courts weighed in prior to 2019. Here you see another one in Maryland. Federal court thrown out the state's congressional map and ordered a new one drawn ahead of the 2020 elections. So what was happening was increasingly...
Wait. What was that case? You got to give me the case.
You
got to give me the case. I need to know what the fuck we're even...
Okay. The case is, let's see... Benisik v. Lemon. So Benis. It's on the screen there. I don't have to read it.
While you're looking it up, just to make the very, very obvious point, time operates linearly. Prior to 2019, it was unresolved. Lower courts make their own rulings because the Supreme Court has not spoken. In 2019, it is resolved. So post 2019, lower courts are not free to make up their own conclusions as to this issue because it was unresolved prior to RUCO and resolved post.
Well, but unresolved prior, my question would be: was there a whole deluge of a difference of rulings across different circuits for whether or not partisan was it consistently upheld in the Ninth Circuit that partisan gerrymanders were not allowed? Was it consistently upheld in the Fifth Circuit that partisan gerrymanders were allowed?
I don't know, but Rob provided you with 2 examples of it not being allowed. So there's at least 2 examples of courts doing what the Supreme Court later clarified they were not permitted to do.
Sure, but then the question is on what grounds were these not allowed? I haven't read these cases. It sounds like neither of you have as well. So I'm curious on what grounds were they thrown out literally just because it was a partisan?
As described, they said that they violated if I recall from Rob from the thing you showed, the Equal Protections Clause and aspects of the First Amendment.
Violating Equal Protections Clause,
that's a nonsense rationale.
Violating Equal Protections Clause is like saying then that partisan gerrymanders are not okay. That's what they're saying there, right?
That's what the lower courts were saying. The lower courts were saying partisan gerrymandering is not okay.
So what I'm asking is for that the Equal Protections Clause, was the argument that the plaintiffs were making in that case, was it based on the fact that it was simply partisan gerrymandering, or was there another argument that they were using?
I'm sure they had multiple arguments. They always have multiple arguments, but partisan gerrymandering was at least one of their arguments.
But Destiny, I don't understand your argument here anyways. It's clear that the federal courts were weighing in, saying that these maps couldn't be drawn this way. And then in 2019, the Supreme Court came in and said that was changing, that these maps were not something that could be adjudicated by federal courts. So it seems like you're arguing just for the sake of arguing.
Well, no, the argument is that we all had an understanding of what Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act meant, and Alito basically destroyed this entire thing such that it's no longer a congressional law, which is kind of irritating because in the past they've appealed so much to, saying that for Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, well, the Congress has to write a law to go further to tell us what they really mean. And then we've had Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that Congress and the Supreme Court have had an understanding of what it's meant for a long time. And now the Supreme Court has basically nullified Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and said we can now do racial gerrymandering. We can do all partisan gerrymandering. It's okay to do that now.
And now we can circle back to my explanation, which is that Section 2 of the VRA says you cannot give a racial minority bloc lesser opportunity. But post 2019, in RUCO, when partisan gerrymandering was resolved, you can partisan gerrymander anyone, including white people. Anybody can be partisan gerrymandered. So if a minority group is partisan gerrymandered, they do not have a lesser opportunity than the majority
but
does,
you still can't,
because the majority is also being partisan gerrymandered.
So you can't actually say that. You can't say I'm going to racially gerrymander. Even Alito says that would still be tossed. But you can say that you're partisanly gerrymandering, which is the only reason why you would ever do a racial gerrymander. So racial gerrymandering has, in effect, through a legal alchemy, has been made legal by Alito, in direct contradiction to what would have been hoped for by the Voting Rights Act.
So to quote Thomas Sowell, when you're used to preferential treatment, equality feels like discrimination. Yes,
I don't know why I don't understand the layman's arguments. Why not use legal ones? If you have a JD, why not appeal to the legal arguments?
Partisan gerrymandered, it would be
this is not a legal argument. These are
privilege
vibes.
Given only to minority
These are vibes.
groups,
It's
not
disappointing.
to be partisan gerrymandered.
Okay.
So yes, if in a world where everyone is being partisan gerrymandered, minority blocs are not given lesser opportunity by being treated the exact same as the majority bloc. If you're being treated the exact same, that's not a lesser opportunity.
It literally is, but that's why. But we didn't want to treat them the exact same. That's why Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act existed. That was the whole point.
Okay, but that's not what they wrote. In Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, it says that it's illegal if you use these means to give these minority blocks a lesser opportunity. That's the language that they used in the Voting Rights Act.
They said that if in a totality of circumstances it seemed like minority voters in a state had their vote consistently overturned by majority voters in a state, that would be bad, that they would have the right to bring a Section 2 claim, basically, through the Gingles or Jingles framework, however you pronounce it, and that they would be allowed to have a majority-minority map drawn if they were consistently getting overturned by the majority white voters, basically, in that state.
Okay, Destiny, do you think that's the direct quote from what they said? Is that the operative legal terminology, you think?
Well, considering that you just Googled it and you're looking at it right now and you're going to pretend that you've memorized the language, my guess is I'm probably not quoting it exactly, but I think I got the spirit of the law correct, yes.
Okay. So when Alito was talking about this law and saying, using this phrase about about opportunity, you think that he was just making it up? Wasn't in the law at all?
He literally did make it up. Yes. If you actually read the case, which I know you didn't because you don't read any of these that you talk about, he goes through each of the words and he basically invents his own cool definition. And then from there, everything kind of logically follows. So he defines opportunity as the way you're defining it right now in a novel way that's never been defined or applied in any prior Supreme Court case. And then that's why he arrives at his new construction, what he calls an updated Gingles framework.
If the majority is being partisan gerrymandered, and the minorities are being partisan gerrymandered, how is that unequal?
Well, if the minority, if their opportunity to have a vote to send a representative to the Congress is consistently overturned by the majority race of that state, then under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, then you would say it seems like, they have been frustrated. Their vote has been...
But my ability to put somebody into Congress is also being frustrated by partisan gerrymandering. How is it unequal that partisan gerrymandering is legal in both cases unless there's some overt racial issue that's involved?
Because partisanship was not partisanship.
Partisan gerrymander is me, Destiny.
The partisan gerrymander was not what it was about. It was about racial groups having their voice represented.
I mean, technically, you're right. Partisan gerrymander was not what it was about. In fact, I agree with Justice Thomas and Justice Gorsuch that partisan gerrymandering was never actually covered by the VRA, and this whole thing has been a misadventure in law to act that it ever did. What it actually covered was things like poll taxes, literacy tests, actual denial of the right to vote, or actual denial of your right to have your vote counted. That's what it covered. But if we're going to say that we're going to not use that argument, then we are stuck with its language, which includes this idea that you cannot have minority groups treated less than the majority groups. But if you're treating them equally to the majority groups, you're not treating them less than
But they wouldn't be treated equally if their vote is always overtaken by the majority groups in the state.
My vote is always overtaken, Destiny.
How? In what state? In what state?
New Jersey.
In New Jersey, white people don't have their candidates of choice elected to the House of Representatives?
No, in New Jersey, I live in districts that are broken up on partisan lines so that somebody who's going to vote for the right will not
That's
be
not
able
the question.
to get...
That has nothing to do with the Voting Rights Act. It's
because
not.
Where
in the Voting Rights Act does it talk about partisanship? It's talking about majority-minority racial groups.
Yes, and
you as a white person have what other white people are voting for in New Jersey. Those candidates are...
And in Louisiana, the issue there is that when they drew up the map, they drew it up on partisan lines, and it also happened to have an impact on minority blocks.
Of course, because minority people vote along partisan lines, of course.
Yes.
Always, yes. But the Voting Rights
Correct.
Act, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act said that if minority groups' votes were consistently being defeated by the majority racial group, that they are allowed to have a majority-minority district created. They were allowed to bring a Section 2 Voting Rights Act case to the Supreme Court to have a district created for them.
To the district court. But yeah, you bring it to a district court, Destiny. But yeah, but that's what it means when you say less opportunity than what?
Than the other racial group.
Then, yeah. And in a world where partisan gerrymandering is the norm, where everyone's getting partisan gerrymandered,
racial groups,
don't have
racial
less
groups.
opportunity if you are being treated the same.
You do if the racial groups vote on partisan lines. If there was a black party and a white party, literally, then the black party was all gerrymandered out on partisan lines, according to Alito.
Well, there basically is, Destiny, a black party in
exactly,
Louisiana.
And the Voting Rights Act said Section 2, you can't do that. But now Alito says you can.
Which then would mean that uniquely in Louisiana cannot gerrymander on partisan lines, but California can, but Nevada can.
Not if they
but
frustrate a minority
Massachusetts
group.
can,
Why do you
but
keep
all these
missing
other
this?
states can.
Wait, not if they're frustrating a minority group's vote.
Well, they're not frustrating a minority group's vote.
Then there's no problem under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. But there would be in Louisiana if they were.
But the technical distinction, Destiny, is that the minorities are, of course, still able to vote regardless of gerrymandering.
It's not about if you're able to vote. It's if you're able to have a vote that is represented in your state's House elections that isn't consistently defeated by the majority race.
Okay, 1 second. That's insane. You don't really believe that, right?
That's what Section
can't be
2 of
the
the Voting Rights
interpretation.
Act. That's what the interpretation
No.
for 37 years. That's how the Supreme Court has understood it, and that's how all the legislature have understood it.
Okay,
Yes.
but if that's the case, let's say a particular state, we'll say hypothetically is 10% black. And those 10% blacks were so unracist, we give them those 10% to draw the map they want. And still they lose. You say, according to the Voting Rights Act, they're not allowed to lose. The mere fact that they lost implies that the Voting Rights Act has been violated because blacks have a right to win. That's bullshit. That's not what the Voting Rights Act says. It says that you can't have special tools designed to disenfranchise people based on race. It doesn't say they're guaranteed to win, and if they lose too much, then we have to change something. That's ridiculous.
I agree. That's why there was a test to determine whether or not a minority group was being frustrated by the majority group. This was the, I don't know if you remember the jingles or gingles, the framework.
It's the Jingles test,
yes.
yeah.
The idea was you have to represent a sizable minority group that is in a contiguous district. So it can't be 10% of people scattered throughout the state. And their vote has to be consistently defeated by the majority racial group of the state. These are the three preconditions for this framework to be met. So if it was the case that black people voted 50-50, half Republican, half Democrat, you have no Section 2 case. If it was the fact, you have no Voting Rights Act case. If it was the fact that the black people were equally scattered throughout the state, you can't make a contiguous district, you have no case. If they're 1% of the population of the state, then they don't represent a sizable minority, you have no case. So there were plenty of defeaters built into Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to make sure that these types of cases, exactly these types of cases, wouldn't be brought before any courts, any federal courts.
Rob, can you pull up my screen? So, Destiny, this is the map that Louisiana was forced to draw under the under the VRA prior to Calais. This crazy district here. Would you say that that's a contiguous district that looks like a sane district that anyone would draw under any normal circumstances?
Well,
it
what's the
stretches
answer to
250
that?
miles.
What's
Destiny.
the answer to that? The answer to that is I would have to look to case law to see what has been considered a contiguous
Well,
district and state.
You just gave a bunch of factors, Destiny.
Correct.
You just gave a bunch of factors. Do you want to repeat them? You had a good list.
I'm not, first of all, I'm not a judge. If I wanted to know how to apply the
Destiny,
factors, right,
you
why
were
are
just
you so
explaining
weak
to
on
us
this?
you were
I'm explaining
how the
what the
VRA
factors are.
works.
I'm saying that as applied, I don't know, for contiguous, like if you were to ask me, well, what if they were 8% of the population? I don't know what constitutes a sizable minority. I don't know 100%. I'm just saying that these were this was the framework that existed before. This is the framework that Alito has destroyed. That's what I'm saying.
So under the framework that you're exalting, Louisiana was forced by a federal court to draw this insane district that stretched 250 miles across the country in order to give the black population in Louisiana a second district, because the map that Louisiana drew did not give them a second district. In fact, under the VRA, Louisiana was essentially forced to do one of the most naked racial-based gerrymanders I've ever seen. Now, this doesn't strike me as equal. This strikes as you're being given a opportunity, you're being given a greater opportunity than anyone in any state would get but for the VRA. This is not equal, this is more. This is a special privilege that was given to minority voters, and the problem that Alito was identifying.
Hold on, what you're saying,
is that
you're just
the
describing.
VRA says less
I understand.
opportunity.
Okay, listen.
If you're treated equally,
yes, and I agree.
then it's
I
not
understand.
a VRA claim.
Yes, I understand. I agree. So like this is okay, and I'm glad you said this. Okay, because this was the argument, and this is what happened: is you just don't like the Voting Rights Act. Alito didn't like Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and you don't like the fact that a minority group is getting some kind of special privilege to be heard here, which is fine, by the way. You can make that argument, but that's not what the Voting Rights Act said, and Alito didn't like it, and he got rid of it. They didn't get rid of it legislatively, like they probably should have. Alito got rid of it by legislating from the bench, which is exactly what he did, because you don't like the idea that a minority group had a special district created for it, which was the whole fucking point of the Voting Rights Act. Otherwise, why would we even have it? We could just point to the 14th Amendment. We could just scream over and over again, equal protections, equal protections, equal protections. And then boom, we'd be done with it. Why do we even need this law in the first place then?
So, Destiny, when the law said less opportunity, you think we should just ignore that language? We should say, actually, you know what? We're giving, as you just said, minority voters a special power, a greater power, an unequal benefit, rather than rectifying when they are deprived of something that non-minority voters get.
That was
So
the
I
whole
think you
point
gave
of
the game
Section
away,
2 of the
Destiny.
Voting Rights Act.
I think you gave the game
What
away.
do you think the point of it was?
The point of it was to make sure that we had a colorblind constitution where voters who are minorities were treated equally. They couldn't be treated worse. What you're arguing is that they should be treated better.
Wait, if it was to be colorblind, why is there any language at all in there whatsoever about minority-majority districts? Or why is there any language in there whatsoever about the majority race overtaking the vote of the minority people?
To force equality coming out of segregation, and we can go back and forth if you want on the benefits and drawbacks of passing laws that would otherwise be unconstitutional in order to rectify past harms of discrimination. It's a rich area if you want to go there, but the language that they used was less opportunity. But what you're describing, Destiny, is the desire to give minorities not equal opportunity, but greater opportunity. And this actually is, I think, a very substantive disagreement. I don't think it's appropriate to give people special powers or special privileges on the basis of their race. I actually think that's racist.
That's great if you think that, and I agree with you. I agree that you can have that thought. No, I agree you can have that thought, but then what you wanted was a repeal of the Voting Rights Act. That's what you wanted, and that's what Alito did.
I wanted the Voting Rights Act to be interpreted consistent with the 2019 case RUCO, which, thank God, now it is.
When it says here, don't say what I want. You have no idea. You project so hard. Oh my God, bro. I'm not even. You're not capable of having the legal argument. Can you please try just to have a legal argument? Please just try to have a legal argument. Holy shit.
I feel like actually Destiny came out and said that openly.
No, I'm just telling you what the Voting Rights Act says. Okay, and I understand that you're saying now you don't like it, which is a fair opinion to have. You can even argue that opinion, but that's not the job of the Supreme Court to decide. That's the job of Congress to decide, right?
You're telling me what it says?
That the Voting Rights Act was created to protect racially minority voters. Yes.
So you're not telling me what it says. You're telling me what the intent was.
Do you think that the Voting Rights Act was to protect the majority vote of white people in the United States?
No, I'm trying to figure out what your argument is, Destiny. First, you're saying that's not what it says, but what it literally says is that they cannot have less opportunity than other members of the electorate. So they can't have less opportunity. If they have the same opportunity, they don't have less opportunity, which is my point.
What does opportunity mean, though? Wait, what does opportunity mean?
More.
What does opportunity mean? What does opportunity mean? What does opportunity mean?
Less opportunity than other members of the electorate to elect representatives of their choice.
Correct. So if you have 85% white people in a state and 15% black people in a state, who is that going to protect more?
It depends, Destiny, on the partisan makeup of the state.
If you have 85%, I'm going to leave if you can't answer this question. If you have 85% white people in the state and 50% black people in the state, do you think that the white districts are going to be gerrymandered out? Who does this protect in general?
Okay, let me explain the point. If the 85% and the 15% were split 50-50 between the parties, and the state nonetheless gerrymandered it so that the black people got no district, that would be a violation of the VRA even after Calais.
But it wouldn't be, though, right?
No, it would be.
It literally wouldn't, because they would still have the members that they wanted elected would still be elected. Yes, that was the whole point. Even if they were somehow gerrymandered out, the members that they want to elect would still be elected.
Go back to my example. I said if the 85 and the 15 were equally split between the political parties, right?
Why would we even?
And then the state nonetheless gerrymandered it so that black people didn't get a district. That would be a violation of the VRA even post Calais.
Gotcha. Can I ask if the racial groups were split 50-50 in how they would vote, why would we even have a Voting Rights Act?
Well, Destiny, it turns out that there were big ramifications for making partisan gerrymandering legal, and you might disagree with that. But I think earlier you said that you agreed with it, that you thought it was the right outcome.
Wait. I'll agree with Destiny. There's an easy answer to this question. Even if all of the Democrats or even if all the blacks were going to vote for one party or the other, or in the other world they were even 50-50, the Voting Rights Act still said you can't put a poll tax, You can't have some sort of test that's intentionally to keep blacks from voting. And the argument, well, it doesn't matter. They would have canceled each other's votes out because half would vote Republican and half Democrat, is not to the point whatsoever.
Sure.
So the Voting
But
Rights Act had nothing to do with the outcome of who gets elected more, the Democrats or the Republicans. By the way, it would be the racist Democrats that they were actually fighting against. But
The
I
people
digress.
all in the South states right now that their ancestors were all Democrats, right? The Republicans of today whose
Now
ancestors
they're
were
good
Democrats,
people.
right?
They've
Right?
realized
Rob?
their
Right,
mistake
Rob?
of being
Right?
Democrat.
Exactly. Thank you.
They're no
So-
That's right. It's always been the Democrats
so-
who were racially focused. Yes.
Of course. So Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act would never exist if the votes were along 50-50 party lines, right?
Destiny.
No. Rob just
Destiny.
answered this.
L-
Rob just
listen,
answered that.
I'm talking specifically about Section 2
Okay.
of the Voting Rights Act.
Right. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which says that you can't have a qualification or prerequisite to voting or standard practice or procedure based on race, basically, right? And you're telling me that if Democrats voted 50% Republican and 50% Democrats, that we would have looked at that law when it was being passed and said, it's perfectly fine to do whatever you want to keep black people from voting because, if they voted, it would be equal Republican.
No,
Of course
we would never
still
pass
have
the
a
law. No, it just wouldn't be a
No,
thing you would
that's-
talk about.
that's-
Why
the
would
law-
anybody
the-
want to try to disenfranchise voters if they're likely to vote either way? The whole point was for
'Cause they're
partisan
racist?
power.
Because they were racist.
Because they were racist. You think in the past, you're laughing and you're making the dumbest point possible, that people would have given up political power for racist gerrymandering? The same people that brought you the 3/5 compromise would have said, well, we know that these blacks are going to vote for us, but let's go ahead and gerrymander them out anyway because fuck it, so that we lose seats.
This-
Do you understand how
this
stupid that
actu-
is?
this
There would be no
actually is-
purpose for the Voting Rights Act to exist
Destiny.
if we all voted on racially partisan lines anyway, which is what Alito has completely brought us back to. Do you agree? I'm just curious. You agree that there will never be a Section 2 case that like a federal court can realistically hear now, right?
No, there could be some. It depends on.
And
it-
Give me an
Let me
example of
ask
one.
you-
Give me an example of one. Because
Poll
now,
taxes.
no. Well, besides that's obviously out of the case. I mean, for gerrymanders.
literacy tests.
For gerrymanders.
Okay. So for gerrymanders, to bring a case now, what you need to show is that they could have achieved their partisan purpose and that there is an alternative map that did not take race into an account that would have done it without disenfranchising,
Correct.
quote unquote, members of that group.
Which totally defeats the entire challenge.
No, it just makes it harder.
No, it doesn't make it harder. You have to demonstrate that any map that you would propose achieves the same partisan ends that their map would
Yes,
propose.
because the partisan ends are legal.
But the whole reason why they're gerrymandering is for partisan ends.
Okay, but earlier you said that you agreed that partisan gerrymandering
Why are
should
you
be
changing
legal.
this earlier? I'm telling you that right now you can
Because you said
gerrymander
it earlier,
races
Destiny.
out
You
of
said-
existence. You can gerrymander the races by claiming it's partisan, but the only reason why you gerrymander is for partisan purposes. That was the whole point.
Listen, you've moved on
they-
quickly.
they-
If I can't, you've moved on quickly from a point I think that's absolutely absurd. The claim that the VRA would have been unnecessary if Democrats split 50-50 or if blacks split 50-50 in how they vote. So let me ask you specifically then. If that's true and no one would have ever pushed for that, let's say hypothetically tomorrow, blacks 90% become Trump supporters and Republican supporters. If there all of a sudden was rules placed to disenfranchise black voters, would you speak up for them and say that that's absurd and that's illegal?
Well, I mean, right now, as per Alito's ruling, you'd be allowed to strip them of their voting abilities by gerrymandering their thing on a partisan boundary.
It's not the question I asked. I asked the question if you specifically would say that that's something, if they just flat out say blacks are no longer allowed to vote. That's good for you now because they're going to vote for Republicans. So would you say perfectly fine by me? I'm
If
fine
they just
with blacks
ban
not
black
being able
people
to-
from voting?
Correct.
I
Or
don't
let's
think...
say they do it through literacy and poll tax. Literacy test and poll tax. Would you be okay with that?
Probably not, no.
Therefore, you disprove your entire argument. Yes, even if it would have been a 50-50 split, there still would have been people that said you can't specifically keep black people from voting. You disprove your entire argument by showing you would be one of those people.
What?
You said that if blacks voted 50-50, no one would have ever suggested a law to prevent poll taxes or to prevent
Wait,
literacy
you just said
tests
if they
or
would
other
have
things to keep them
I thought
from
in your example
voting.
you said if the blacks voted 90% conservatives.
Correct.
Okay.
And you said, even in that world, you, who is clearly not a conservative and dislikes them, would have said, yes, it's still wrong to disenfranchise them. That's exactly my point. There are people that would have said you can't disenfranchise black people, even if they're voting 50-50, because it's still unhuman, it's still against their rights, etc. As you're doing
I don't
right
even
now.
know how you would gerrymander them on racial boundaries if they voted 50-50 This is why the
Because-
Section 2 argument doesn't work here, and I think Kagan pointed it out well in her dissent that
Because-
the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act basically defeats itself if the races are all voting relatively separately, because you would never be able to make a contiguous district of minority voters whose vote was being suppressed by the majority voters.
Because you're conflating that the Voting Rights Act was specifically or primarily about gerrymandering, which was never the case. That's why when you're looking at it through the lens of gerrymandering and you're talking about a 50-50 split, you're like, the Voting Rights Act would have never been necessary. Yes, it would have, because the primary purpose was Jim Crow
We're talking
laws of
specifically
poll taxes,
Section 2.
literacy test, etc.
Section 2 was the big part of the Voting Rights Act that Alito
Correct.
basically destroyed. So that's basically is what people
No,
have been
no, no.
talking about is
He
Section
did
2 of the
not.
Voting Rights Act. Of course he did.
He
It's
did
gone.
not. He did not destroy the part which the primary focus with things like poll taxes, literacy tests, etc. The reason, the intent of it was never gerrymandering. That was never the intent. So when you say they would have never passed Section 2 of the VRA had it been that blacks voted half Republican, half Democrat, that's just nonsensical. They
Okay,
would
wait.
still
So
post
just
it
curious.
because
Okay, I'm just curious then. If right now a state were to pass a law on Trump's family biography or some shit that 99% of white people could pass, but 1% of black people pass, would you guys both defend that as being an okay law?
No.
Why not?
Wait,
If it's not,
wait.
wait. Why not? If it's explicitly, there's nothing racial about that test. No.
Well, the question is, there's some sort of test, like a literacy test or an educational
Sure,
test.
make it a
is what you're
literacy
saying?
test. Yeah.
And 99%. Well, I'm against sort of those sorts of qualifications.
That's not what I'm
anyways, on
asking.
your right
I'm
to
saying,
vote.
I'm saying, as per our reading here now of the Voting Rights Act, right?
That would have
Because
nothing to do with it.
Because you would have, if let's say you had we could just use the examples from history. If you put in a literacy test that basically prevented black people from voting,
Sure.
then by the plain language of the VRA, black people now have less opportunity to vote.
Wait. But what
than
if the
white
voting?
people.
What if the literacy test? There wasn't any racial thing about it. That was just the effect.
I am describing historic examples where there was not.
You can't rely on historic
sometimes
examples
they do-
because that's what Alito didn't want to rely on. I agree with what you're saying because what you're quoting now is the part that he got rid of, which was the totality of circumstances. But I'm saying if there's no racial language, it's just a biography about Trump's family, and it just so happens to disenfranchise 99% of black voters and 1% of white voters, like the new gerrymanders are now going to be allowed to do.
Yes.
Why would you be against the literacy poll test or whatever, but you'd be in favor of the racial gerrymanders?
Because in that case, black people would be given less opportunity to vote than white people.
Isn't that happening right now in the racial in the way that gerrymanders happening across the southern states?
It's not.
Wait,
They
wait.
have the exact same opportunity to vote and have their vote counted.
But not if they don't. But it wasn't about having their vote counted. It was about having members of their class of citizens
Yes.
being able to.
But the example you gave was a literacy test, which is about having your vote counted, which is why I was talking about having your vote counted and why that would be a problem under the VRA, because it wouldn't have anything to do with the gerrymandering jurisprudence.
Why is it that the totality of circumstances language was adopted from, I believe, from Bolden, and then added to
Who's
the
helping you now?
what? What do you mean? Who's helping out?
Is that Kafka or Pisco?
I don't even know if either one of them are awake. I read the whole decision on stream.
Okay.
I'm guessing you
Sure,
didn't.
Go ahead.
Hold on. Look at me right now. What are the changes that Alito suggested to the Gingles framework?
To the Gingles framework? I have not memorized them. I'm happy to.
Then how are you even answering the question of whether or not a Section 2 case could be brought
I'm
before the
making
court
fun
if
of
you don't even know the change?
for looking off screen and getting it from your chat. I'm making a joke, Destiny.
This was one of the most cited cases in the decision. You have no idea because you haven't even read it. You don't even know.
No,
I don't even know how you were answering my earlier questions if you didn't even know what any of this even was. How are you answering whether or not a Section 2 case could even be brought before if the whole point of Section 2 cases was they relied on the Gingles framework and now that framework has been completely destroyed? Kagan says we should call it the Calais upturning or whatever instead of the new
Because
Gingles
the
framework.
way
You
that- because
can't
the-
explain it. Why are you
the
explaining this to me now when you just said you don't
important
even know what the
part
new
was
framework
how-
is?
I didn't say that. I
love you guys.
That's the thing that
You're
you
good.
wanted to yell.
Okay. I can't. I can only do so much of this back and forth. What? I am Googling things, I guess, if you want to see. I was just Googling the plain text of Section 2 here, and then... Oh, I used this to get to the plain text of it. Oh, and then I'm trying to find some of these cases that they're talking about. Court strikes down Maryland's gerrymander 2001. Some of the AIs were agreeing with points of something, but I get very nervous about, citing AIs. Like this one striking down the lower court's ruling or whatever. But Jesus Christ. The Ryan guy is just... Oh my God.
You ready?
Yep.
3, 2.
Does Section 2 include anything about being able to vote or not? I don't know if they call out voting in particular. I know that I don't remember which court case added it, but because I think gerrymandering was not considered part of it originally. There might have been Section 1 because it's not like a poll tax or a literacy test or whatever else, but then in later cases it was added to that to understand that a statute includes a gerrymander, which could be a racial thing or whatever. I don't like that. I don't like that Ryan is so condescending. I don't like that he engages in so much like filibuster. Nothing is more frustrating to me than when like you're trying to rattle off 3 points, and I disagree big time on point 1, but you want to get through all 3 of your points and then give like an analogy or an example, and it's like, holy fuck, bro. Can we just go back to point 1 and work through these point by point? Oh my God, it drives me fucking crazy. Was Rob 100% AI in that convo? Yeah, he asks AI questions. But I don't even give a fuck. I don't care. If you want to ask AI shit or whatever, that's fine. The fact that this guy keeps trying to little bro me and he hasn't even read any of these court cases drives me fucking crazy. It drives me insane that he hasn't read any of the fucking court cases. Because the reason why that ticked me off so much before is because part of the big deal, in my opinion, about this is that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has been gutted because that Gingell's framework has been basically updated to make it impossible to bring a court case, because one of the 3 huge elements that was changed, preconditions to being able to bring this case, is you've got to be able to demonstrate that the gerrymander was done on racial boundaries, but it wasn't done on partisan boundaries, which is impossible because every racial gerrymander is going to be partisan. So that in and of itself almost frustrates every potential Section 2 case. I think the second one is you're now required to submit a map. The onus is on you to submit a map that would satisfy all of the partisan gerrymandering desires of the defense, which is also like, what the fuck is even the point of bringing the case then? And then I'm trying to remember the third thing that was changed. I don't know if they touched the third one. Oh, it might be that you have to show that your contiguous racial group's vote was being oppressed by comparing it to like members outside of your race, I think. So like if black people were losing all of their votes, but it was because they were all voting for Democrats, and then white people voting for Democrats lost their votes. Like that would also like kill your job. Basically, I'd have to go back and check exactly, but basically all Section 2 cases are dead. I think is the example. The legal examples coming for this. Like, Section 2 cases are just dead. But for him to say that like, oh well, I don't think so, blah blah blah, and he keeps trying to like, when he tried to check me on the fucking on the AI shit. Like, Bolden is a case it's called back to over and over and over again. The only reason why he doesn't know that is because he didn't read the case. So for him to claim that I'm using AI when he doesn't even know what was written in that fucking case because he didn't read it while pretending that he read it and then pretending to give me some legal analysis. I don't care. All right. This is why I hate talking to these motherfuckers. Okay. More court case stuff? I'll go over tomorrow. I'm fucking tired. Jesus fucking Christ. I love you guys. It's been fun. Stay safe. Be careful. Ripperino, cappuccino, poppuccino, hoppuccino, moppuccino, cappuccino, cappuccino, appuccino, Al Pacino, whatever Marinos. Stay safe. Be careful. Oh, yeah. And then I also hate the idea that these guys keep saying that I'm for racial gerrymandering. I don't know. Voting Rights Act, I don't know. You could go back and forth on it. I've never given a strong opinion on it. Just that it's a law. If you don't like it, then strike down the law. It's not up to the Supreme Court to decide if they like a law or not. Generally speaking, that's not what the Supreme Court's supposed to do. That's usually what originalists are very mad at when the Supreme Court does it. But
remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.